Well, I can see that the Dungeon of Doom and the Four Horsemen are now together, representing World Championship.
Here comes the Giant! Look out, NWO!
Thank God for the Giant.
Never thought we would hear it. The Giant is going to have their lunch. The Giant is in the building. Whoa, 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 whoa. The Giant!
What is
the
this?
Giant! No! No!
DiBiase.
Tired of this stuff, this DTA stuff.
No.
Don't trust anybody. He's got to go. You know why? What? You better learn to trust somebody right now.
No.
Trust the wall. We got no way out. It's either you trust him or you don't. Look at me in the eye. You know I'm.
What in the world is going on?
I can trust you. Now look at his eyes and know that you can trust him.
I know I can trust him too. Look, I'm looking at him. I'm looking at you. Everything's gonna be okay.
No.
That Sting's voice talking to DiBiase. No.
Hey, stay right there. Stay right there.
No.
All right, where is he?
Where's who?
You know who? What
There's
are you
Luger.
Stinger?
Stinger. What would Stinger be doing with me? Look, Luger, I'm standing out here in a parking lot minding my own.
No!
That's it.
No!
That's it. Oh, that's right. Oh,
No!
nice. Come on, Dennis. That's right.
Oh, we're in bad trouble now. We're in bad
Believe
this.
this.
Sting has turned.
He's been bought off by DiBiase.
Stinger, no Sting.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a second. Wait 1 second. Start it again, brother. I've been waiting 6 days for this. I gotta hear this, but you better make it short and sweet.
All I gotta is, I'll make it real short. All I gotta say is it was not me on Monday night. It wasn't me, Lex.
Well, I'll tell you what. We got a war games right now. I saw you. I looked you right in the face before you cheap shot at me. And Stinger, I know it was you. I can't believe you, and I don't believe you.
So for all of those fans out there and all those wrestlers and people that never doubted the Stinger, I'll stand by you if you stand by me. But for all of the people, all of the commentators, all of the wrestlers, and all of the best friends who did doubt me, you can stick it.
Hey, welcome back to the first ever NWO Monday Nitro.
The one singular mistake I ever made was bringing Hulk Hogan into WCW. And Hogan and the rest of you thugs, because that's all you are, you're thugs. You want to come in here, you want to try to stop WCW? Well, we've worked too hard, we've worked too long. And gentlemen, and I use that word very carefully because it really doesn't apply. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Listen to me and listen to me now. It is going to stop. No more.
20 years ago, podcasts are going back in the time machine to September of 1996 for Volume 1 of this month's show. Volume 2 is your WWF show, looking at In Your House. Volume 3, it looks at all of your ECW action for the month. And Volume 4 takes us to UFC for the latest UFC show. I'm being joined firstly by Rory McNamara. Rory, good evening.
Nice.
And to Bryan Barrera. Bryan, good afternoon.
Hey guys.
Bryan, start us off with the news.
The Giant became the latest big name to join the NWO as the group swelled in size from 4 people from the end of August to nearly 10 now. After attempts to get the British Bulldog in failed and the company couldn't get clearance for the 123 Kid, they decided the Giant was a better option for the alternatives. By the end of the month, along with the Giant, the group had recruited Cobra, now playing a fake Sting gimmick, the Nasty Boys, the 123 Kid, now called Six, racing driver Kyle Petty and Virgil, now playing a character called Vincent. Nitro went off the air on September 30th with the group attempting to recruit Miss Elizabeth.
A week after recruiting the Giant, the NWO appeared to have gotten to Sting too, with a well-executed angle involving the former Cobra. But while it came off well, it actually led to a huge exodus in viewers, as nearly 750,000 homes turned Nitro off during the 15 minutes that followed. All this, the angle seemingly continued as planned. The real Sting ended up abandoning Team WCW at Fall Brawl, before cutting a promo on Nitro the next night declaring himself a free agent, and telling those who doubted his loyalty to stick it.
Fall Brawl featured WCW's strongest in-ring pay-per-view in a long time, right until a flat couple of main event matches. A hot Carolina crowd that largely seemed to cheer who they recognized more than faces and heels got treated to a near-flawless undercard. There were wins for Diamond Dallas Page, Ice Train, Conan, Chris Benoit, Rey Mysterio Jr., and Harlem Heat. Unfortunately, once the big boys got involved, the quality decreased quite a lot. The Giant defeated Randy Savage, and Team NWO, including Fake Sting, defeated Team WCW, when Lex Luger gave up in the Scorpion Deathlock. The show went off the air with the NWO beating up Randy Savage.
It was quite the expensive month for the NWO. Following the Giant's turn, he and Hogan ended up destroying the commentary desk and set, which may have cost up to $40,000 to replace. Later in the month, it's reported that the Giants actually had to buy a Cadillac that the NWO smashed up in an angle on Saturday night. They rented a car, but with an agreement only a certain amount of damage would be done. And as Giant did most of the damage...
Randy Savage, WCW contract is rumored to be up soon. He'll be facing Hollywood Hogan in the main event of Halloween Havoc next month. With WCW talent in Japan on September 23rd, the second half of Nitro was turned into NWO Monday Nitro. While it was an entertaining hour, the ratings dropped by an entire point, and most of those didn't turn over to Raw, who are doing their own fake angle with Diesel and Razor. With that being said, there were currently plans to have NWO regularly have their own part of WCW Saturday night shows.
And a bit of admin before we get into the news. We are now officially on Patreon. For those of you who want to chuck a couple of bucks, a couple of quid our way, we're offering $5 a month for quote-unquote early access to podcasts. Not this one, because this is the final one of the month, but the others we take throughout the month. If you'd like to say a thank you, we are in part of for other shows that go up online when they're ready, rather at the end of the month. I'll plug that more at the end, but if you'd like to find out more, the link is in the description, or you can go to patreon.com/wrestling20YRS. Now, on to the ratings for the month. Raw was preempted on September the 2nd. Nitro did a 4.2 in its absence. And Championship Friday, Raw did a 1.8 for the WWF. The rating story for the rest of the month saw Nitro hammer Raw every week. On September the 9th, Nitro did a 3.7 to Raw's 2.4. On September the 16th, coming off of Fall Brawl, Nitro did a 3.7 to Raw's 2.1. Raw bottomed out at 2.0 against Nitro's 3.4 on September the 23rd, coming off of In Your House and the anticipated reveal of Ramon and Diesel. Hear more about that in Volume 2.
Ric Flair impersonation. They are arguing right now with Nick. They're going after Nick Patrick, and evidently the argument has gone from the locker room area all the way outside, and look at Nick Patrick go. And he's headed to the limo. No,
he didn't. He took a right.
No. And Ted DiBiase has gotten into the limo. Ted DiBiase.
Oh, what is this now?
Oh, look at that. Sting just threw a brick through the windshield.
Oh, things are getting out of hand now.
Sting just threw a cement block through the windshield, and they're stealing a cop car.
Right
behind out loud. Sting and Luger have blasted.
We opened Nitro on September the 2nd with a recap of last week's NWO paint job. Dallas Page beats Alex Wright with a diamond cutter. Post-match, Gene Okerlund interviews Nick Patrick. Gene taking fabulous offence at being called a liar. Patrick obviously called the Gene's hotline. Marcus Bagwell peddles the new Nitro denim shirt at $39.95. Ted DiBiase again comes out during the Harlem Heat and Greg Valentine Buddy Valentino match. Booker getting the win with the Harlem sidekick. The Nasties come out post-match to spike Booker and beat Stevie Ray around ringside. Mike Tenay joins Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko for Malenko vs Jericho. A fast start from Jericho gets some ECW chants. Midway through, the camera cuts to DiBiase leaving. The crowd get back in the match as the two go fast. Tenay adding to the call. Jericho gets the win and ringside fans embrace him. Brad Armstrong gets a go at the Giant, getting in a couple of drop kicks while the chokeslam gets the win for the Giant. The camera's cut to the parking lot and we see the limousine before another NWO paid for commercial. Hogan goes solo and we build to War Games. Bischoff and Heenan take the desk for hour 2, running down the Outsiders and DiBiase for the past few weeks. Ron Studd comes out for another squash. Unlike last week, it's again Macho Man who gets the win. That'll end Studd's push then, eh? The Outsiders leave the limo. We cut to Sting and Luger entering the ring to face the Steiners. Out back, the Horsemen then ambush the limo to see who was in it, but it was empty. Nick Patrick's heel turn takes another twist, throwing out the Steiner match after Luger bumps into him. Rick and Scott get the DQ win to a large amount of boos. The entire Dungeon of Doom and the Four Horsemen make their way to the ring for the main event. McMichael and Bubba Rogers brawl to start, then the Barbarian and Benoit have a chop-off. Bischoff announces the local police department have arrived. Cameras cut to Sting and Luger bricking the black limo before commandeering a cop car. Yes, that really happened. Benoit and Sullivan go at it in the ring. It starts to break down with Randy Anderson just about managing to control it. The two teams go at it with Flair pinning Sullivan, one with the assist. Outside, out come the Outsiders and Hogan to wreak havoc. Giant comes out to make the save, but then chokeslams the Dungeon of Doom before high-fiving the NWO. Savage tries to better them, but gets worked over with a chair. The ring gets trashed by the crowd again, and the Men in Black see off anything trying to get in. The NWO take over the commentary desk, and an arena-wide brawl breaks out, and the desk gets destroyed as we go off the air.
Is there any question now? Who is the most powerful man in professional wrestling? Is there any question now? What is the most powerful organization in professional wrestling? We got a hold of the Giant. We straightened his head out. And now, there's not 4. There's not 5. Mr. DiBiase. Ha 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 ha. Tell him, big man. I got a phone call while I was sitting home at my modest house. Ted DiBiase called me, and he says, I want to talk to you about business. Can you fly to Florida? I said, yes, I can, because I am about business. I walked into a 25,000 square foot home, the home of Hulk Hogan. There was that. Spit on it for me. Spit on it. When I walked into this house, there wasn't one Harley Davidson in the garage. There were 20 Harley Davidsons. There wasn't one Mercedes. There was 5 Mercedes, a couple of Vipers. I walked around this big home and got dizzy. See you later, boys. Come on, big man. Anything less, come on. Now, before I was so rudely interrupted, the point I was getting to is I was dizzy walking around this mansion, a 25,000 square foot mansion. Brother, every time I turned around, everything I showed you, you can have. You wanted a part in Arnold Schwarzenegger's new movie, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, got it for you. And the bottom line is, brother, just to quote somebody, a stupid little man, whether you like it or whether you don't like it, it's the best thing going today. The NWO. Man, I stood down at a table.
Now, we come back in, before we start to discuss now, and then the Sting thing I think we're going to discuss after the pay-per-view because that continues on a bit and we don't really want to discuss it twice. But we come to Nitro on September the 2nd. Obviously the week after the show at the end of August where Ted DiBiase came out and said, there's 4 of us now, next week there will be 5. Now, the idea for this, and as it has been for a while, was that the 4th guy, well, the 5th if we're counting DiBiase, was going to be the 1, 2, 3 kid. Now, he'd been away from the WWF for a while, but his debut kept getting delayed because they couldn't get clearance from the WWF for him to start. The WWF had to kind of formally grant his release, and they hadn't done that yet. And so within the week leading up to the show, they were looking around trying to find another alternative. And the name that came to mind, believe it or not, was the British Bulldog, as we briefly mentioned in the news. Now, Bulldog, as we know, I think in June, kind of handed in his notice with the WWF, not with the viewpoint that he was necessarily going to leave, with the viewpoint that if he handed in his notice, his contract wouldn't roll over. And so effectively his contract would expire and he would have options. Now, WCW was one of those options, but Vince McMahon, I think, fearing what might happen if another big name had gone to WCW, was able to eventually come to terms with a deal with Bulldog. Now, WCW thought that was going to happen, and it didn't. So they've got a couple of days to go, and they're like, no, we've kind of promised a big angle here, a kind of a big name. Who do we go with? And Bryan, they went with the Giant.
I think it was a good choice. I think that actually gives him a nice shot in the arm, even though the Giant on that Nitro where it's revealed that he's the new NWO member, he's not really that good on the microphone, I've come to find out. When he's not having to scream, he can't really do too much.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was Hogan being Hogan, but the Giant promo at the end, I think Hogan thought, this is maybe starting to go a bit awry. I'll cut him off. Rory?
I was really digging the Giant's sort of pseudo, quasi, semi-babyface run, actually. So in that respect, it came as a bit of a disappointment. But as you say, Bob, they promised something big, pun I'm sure intended. And I think with all the available options as they stood at that point, I think Giant was the only logical choice. And the turn was fairly well done. The only real problem was he was cheered to the rafters for attacking the Dungeon of Doom, because quite frankly, who wouldn't be?
Well, true. Yeah, and the NWO as a whole managed to bring to an end a Dungeon of Doom match, which if that's making baby faces, I don't know what will. But from a roster standpoint, we were sat here last month talking about Giant kind of being, the next mega babyface. That was kind of my view. I know they'd already done Giant and Hogan, basically it's two heels at Hog Wild. But I was looking at that and going, yeah, give it a couple of months, shift some things around, and the NWO are going to need a big name to go against. I kind of thought he was going to be, number one was my kind of thought. Yes, there is a point to an extent. Who else could they have done? And there's no obvious candidate. Apparently they discussed Sting, they discussed Luger, they probably discussed Flair and guys like that. None of those seem great. We'll discuss Sting later in the show. But Roy, I just don't know. The bigger problem, and we're probably going to have more discussion about this at the end, is that this is a zero-sum game. For every guy you take from one side, if the new NWO member has to come from inside WCW, you remove a guy from the WCW side and build up the NWO, which in Hogan's case made perfect sense. And in some of the other switches we've seen since make a lot of sense. Nasty Boys go across, things like that. That kind of works. But with the Giant, it felt like the NWO are now extremely strong, and WCW are a lot weaker.
So this goes back to what I said when the NWO formed a couple of months ago when I was on the pod then. It's for the NWO to be a serious threat, they've got to have big names in there, no doubt about it. But on the other side of the coin, if they load themselves with huge names and form world champions, etc., then nobody's going to buy WCW as fighting back against them. That was my fear 2 months ago when it was just 3. And now I'm a little bit concerned that that's where they're going. And feel even at this early stage that the WCW team are effectively just a bunch of goobers. But they've now got to be very, very careful that they don't go that far, because it looks they're heading in that direction, unfortunately, and that's a worry.
I think we'll discuss that more later in the show. Bryan, what did you think of the angle? Because there's a lot of, there was a lot of discussion backstage as to how it went down, and a lot of, controversy and feeling that Hogan was able to leverage a situation, surprise, surprise, where rather than the originally planned angle, which was the 8 members of the collective Dungeon of Doom and 4 Horsemen would be dominating the NWO, and shock horror, the idea that NWO might show any weakness, with the idea that they would dominate the 8-on-3, and then out would come the Giant to clean house and join the NWO. While the angle we got probably gave us more of a surprise in that because the NWO were on top against 8 men, the Giant came out and it looked like he was going to save it for WCW, and as Rory mentioned, got quite a big pop for it as a result. Brian, we ended up with the NWO looking pretty dominant 3-on-8 anyway, and then Giant comes out and makes it 4-on-8, and it's like, and it comes back to what I said a minute ago, WCW just aren't competing right now.
I completely agree with what Rory said. I actually do think that WCW is looking like a bunch of goofs at this point because I don't know if it was this Nitro or the next Nitro. You see who's within WCW's ranks, and it's the Horsemen, it's the Steiners, and then it's the Dungeon of Doom. There's Kevin Sullivan wearing a WCW Monday Nitro shirt and a bandana, challenging the NWO. It does look completely out of place at this point.
Yeah, I think we're going to discuss this more as the show goes on, both on the pay-per-view and also afterwards. But it's, the balance is there to be struck. It's tricky. Let's discuss it more at the end. Let's move on. We're going to do our TV reports and then we'll come back for the pay-per-view.
He's not smart enough to give up. He'll sustain a broken back and think nothing of it. That's how he thinks.
Steiner unsuccessful in his main strategy, which was to stay away from the power moves, but here comes Nick Patrick to ringside.
Nick Patrick is out.
What's this?
Nick Patrick motioning Luger to the back. Nick Patrick is going after.
Something's happened to Sting.
The back Luger is chasing Nick Patrick.
Something's happened to Sting, I bet.
I heard him say out back, out back. And hold on, let's listen.
There's DiBiase.
I'm tired of this stuff, this DTA stuff.
No.
Don't trust anybody. He's got to go. You know why? What? You better learn to trust somebody right now.
Oh, no.
We're up against the wall. We got no way out. It's either you trust him or you don't. Look at me in the eye. You know I'm...
What in the world is going on?
I know I can trust you.
Now look in his eyes and know that you can trust him.
I know I can trust him, too. Look, I'm looking at him. I'm looking at you. Everything's going to be okay.
No.
That's Sting's voice talking to DiBiase.
No.
Hey, stay right there. Stay right there.
No.
Where is he? Where's who? You know who? What There's Luger. Stinger. What would Stinger be doing with me? Look, Luger, I'm standing out here in a parking lot minding my own.
No!
That's it.
No!
That's it. Oh, that's right. Oh,
no!
Nice. Come on, Dennis. That's right.
Oh, we're in bad trouble now.
We're
in
believe this. Sting has turned.
He's been bought off by DiBiase.
It is Sting and the NWO.
Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko welcome us by stating the power has shifted from WCW to the NWO on September the 9th. A young Super Callow makes his debut against the experienced Pat Tanaka, who's thought quite sprightly. The youngster gets the win with a top rope fuck up, but do look up Callow's mask if you can. Rick Steiner cuts a strangely childlike promo saying he had Lex Luger beat last week. The NWO air a paid-for promotion selling a shirt, which young bootleggers are shown outside the arena selling. We see footage of a Glacier debut, which, yes, after months of vignettes, didn't even happen on Nitro. Another debut sees the return of WWS Quebecers, who go up against the Nasty Boys. Jacques Rougeau and Carl Oulet start an O Canada to answer some cheap heat. Knobs cracking the Montreal flag over Jacques, letting Sags get the win to deny the amazing French Canadians. Post-match, the Nasties declare their WCW. Sergeant Craig Pittman and Flash Norton have a quick submission match, but Ice Train throws in the towel. The Horsemen question Luger where Sting is before War Games. Hoovy gets a run out against Joe Gomez. Some sloppiness doesn't stop Barrera getting the win. Nick Patrick explains his call from last week's tag match outside the NWO paper, The Parking Lot. Rick Steiner and Lex Luger close out the first hour, but Luger goes out back after Nick Patrick runs to the ring and tell him it's Sting and it's called the Count Out. Outside, a voice that sounds like Sting is heard talking to DiBiase from the limo, but as Luger arrives, the fake Sting steps out of the limo and lays the boots in alongside Hogan and DiBiase, raining quite a lot. The announce team air their shock at what we just saw. Things get a bit tasty on commentary as Mike Tenay questions WCW's leadership to the chagrin of Bischoff. In ring, Rey Mysterio Jr. gets a quick win over Billy Kidman in a good TV contest. A downbeat Bischoff bemoans the latest with Sting and the Public Enemy take on Meng and the Barbarian. Mid-match, what seems like an overgrown leprechaun runs around the ring with very minimal comment. We cut to the Horsemen and Luger with their thoughts on Sting. Back in the ring, Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge bring in a table and Meng gets moonsaulted through it, which apparently isn't a DQ. The Dungeon of Doom clear the ring at the end for questioning the story with Sting. An NWO paid-for promotion airs showing Sting in black and white for the first time. They start to build the brand really well. The main event sees Savage take on former Shark or Earthquake, John Tenta. Macho gets beat down early, but gets tented with a chair to even the match up. Again, no disqualification. Like last week, Savage gets called to the back, this time by Teddy Long. One limo leaves as Savage arrives, but the WCW roster then go about tagging the second with leftover spray paint. A heartfelt promo from Heenan and Tenay leads an impression promo from the Horsemen, leaving Bischoff to question the decision to ever bring Hulk Hogan to WCW as we lead into War Games. You listen hard in the background, you can almost hear the ringing of cash registers.
I thank you very much, Eric Bischoff. We're back here, all of us very mixed up right now. Emotions are running high. Lex Luger, I tried talking to him. He's beside himself. Arn Anderson, for the record, maybe you can sort out what we saw earlier on out in the parking lot here on Nitro.
I'm not disturbed that Luger lost a friend. I'm not sad that I lost a teammate. I guess what I am is standing here in shock because the only constant, Sting, over the last 10 years since they actually bought the company was you. People went here, people went there, people changed attitudes. The only one thing that you could always count on was Sting. Sting was the constant. I got a sick feeling in my stomach. I'm in shock. I guess the only thing I can say for the first time in my life is I'm out of words. I'm speechless. But Luger, I gotta have an answer.
What the hell is going on? Is everybody selling out these days? Who can you trust?
You want answers from me? I don't have any answers. My best friend in the whole world out there in that stinking soaking rain just stabbed me in the back, Arn. And you know what? That makes this match the biggest match right before the biggest match of my career and everybody else is in here. It makes me want to be in that match all the more. It gives me the incentive that I've wanted. And let me tell you, I'm out of here because I know where he lives. I know where he works out. It's our gym. He's been my best friend for 10 years, and I'm going to go find him right now.
You know, I don't know if you can still trust this consortium or not, but maybe you can touch on it very quickly. Ric Flair, we're running short on time. Go ahead.
Me, G, to sort all this out. I've stood here. I've listened to it all. I'm sick of it. The confusion is over. We're the Horsemen. We're Arn Anderson. We're McMichael. We're Benoit. We're Flair. And if Luger wants to ride, he can ride. We're going to War Games. Hogan, Nash, Hall, Sting, when they lock the door of that cage, 4 of us will walk out. 4 of us will pay price that only God will know about, pal. That's it. War Games, we're the Horsemen, and Winston-Salem, by God, we're coming to town.
All right. They don't want the spot.
Hollywood.
I'm looking at 2 right now, chomping at the bit.
Hollywood.
That were dying for it originally. By God, maybe they'll end up with it. It's a fight to the death. Yours, not ours.
Gentlemen, let's get back to you,
Lock
Eric.
the doors. Give me the call. Give me the call.
Well, quite obviously.
Back into the pay-per-view of Rory. You can kick us off with the results.
Indeed. Diamond Dallas Page defeated Chavo Guerrero Jr. Ice Train defeated Scott Norton in a submission match. Conan defeated Juventud Guerrera for to retain the AAA Heavyweight Championship. Chris Benoit defeated Chris Jericho. Rey Mysterio Jr. defeated Super Callow to retain the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. Harlem Heat defeated the Nasty Boys. to retain the WCW World Tag Team Championship. The Giant defeated Randy Savage. And in the War Games main event, the NWO team of Hollywood Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and the Fake Sting defeated Team WCW of Lex Luger, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and Sting.
Brian, what do you think of this show?
I actually agree with your write-up from earlier. This show was fantastic up to the last two matches. Once you got the main event guys up and running, it just kind of fell apart wrestling-wise. But the crowd were super into some of the stuff later on until the absolute, the swerve at the end that just leaves everyone in such a weird haze, like just a flatliner to end the show.
Rory.
I agree completely with Brian. I thought for the first 2 hours this show was absolutely cooking on gas, and if it carried on in that vein, I think this would have been best pay-per-view of the year, hands down. Great work, everyone tried hard. And a lot of the undercard matches were actually given good amount of time to tell a story. I think matches 3, 4, and 5, good 13 to 15 minutes, which doesn't always happen in WCW. There were some flaws, but we'll get into those. But by and large, I was really enjoying it for those 2 hours. And then when, let's say, the powers that be got their little mitts on things, it all got a bit ugly. Still got its fair share of talking points. But from an in-ring perspective, it fell off quite badly. But on the whole, this was a very, very good pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was really dull. Let's be honest about that. I mean, for the first 2 hours, this was about as near a flawless show as you will ever see. Now, I've got my own qualms in the sense that much of the action, while good, didn't really matter. And it was played out in front of a crowd that I think treated it like that too. A lot of the guys that were getting cheered on this show were just guys they'd seen before. There were a couple of very definite examples where heels were getting cheered just because they knew who they were. Diamond Dallas Page being one, and Chris Benoit being a member of the Horsemen. We're in North Carolina, definitely being another. But the action was always good to very good, and you can't say that about very many shows. And then we get to the final two matches, and the work rate drops a lot, and the talking points go up a lot. And there was some very, very questionable decisions on the booking front, but we'll come to those as we get to them. We start Fall Brawl with a nice black and white video montage surmising the NWO angle to date. Tony Schiavone is sporting quite striking red bow tie. Heenan and Dusty are all in black because you come to this show for fashion reports, of course. We see clips from Saturday night at the NWO smashing up a car with baseball bats, as we referenced in the news. We're in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We open up with Diamond Dallas Page versus Chavo Guerrero Jr. There's a number of NWO shirts visible in the audience already. Chavo starts with a flip dive to the outside. He continues the attack on the outside, ramming Page into the steps and whipping him with a belt. Back in the ring, Chavo stays on top with multiple arm submissions. He hits a nice tilt and well head scissor attempt. Page stops it, but Chavo counters into a nice arm drag. Page hits a flying shoulder tackle from the top rope, which gets a real nice reaction. The crowd are behind him. Page goes for a suplex. Chavo counters with an inside cradle and nearly gets it. Page gets on the top with a series of rest holds. Chavo rallies, but Page gets a gas from the crowd with a nice forearm shot. Page gets Chavo's head by his crotch, seems to insinuate something, but Chavo takes it down. Chavo comes off with the top with a nice high angle drop kick, but Page kicks out. Chavo returns to the top, hits a head scissors takedown, another late kick out. Page tries to cover using the ropes, but Chavo kicks out anyway. Page picks up Chavo and lobs him into the other ring. Obviously there's two. That gets another pop from the crowd. Schiavone says he's not sure whether the other ring counts as a count out. I'm surprised he didn't reference that it could have been a DQ also. Chavo gets a roll up for a near fall. The crowd, dropped the line there. Page catches Chavo off the ropes with a spinning power bomb. That looked really nice. The crowd awed at that one, and Chavo barely kicks out. Page hits a rough-looking diamond cutter. The crowd were all over that too, and Page wins the match. Rory.
I'm normally fairly old school. Well, I normally like to see the babyface go over in the opening of a pay-per-view. Not here. Because Page is in the
hang on. The babyface in this match was Diamond Dallas Page.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. I was with the crowd on that one. He is in the form of his life at the moment. He is putting in some fantastic performances. It's absolute night and day from where he was even say 18 months ago. I'd always go as far as say it is becoming a pleasure to watch him in the ring because he has worked so hard to try and improve himself, and it's paying dividends. He's fleshed out his moveset. He's got his character down pat. His heel selling is excellent. I'm so impressed with him. And I hope this means, we said this a couple of times this year actually, but I hope this really does mean a proper sustained push very soon at the top of a card for him. These two work very well together. I thought Chavo, this is the first time I've seen him in a decent length match, and he's fine. His moveset is pretty decent as well. He's pretty vanilla, I've got to say. He certainly doesn't have the natural charisma of Eddie or say the snap of Rey Mysterio, but he's a good worker, and he's had to showcase a lot of stuff here himself. So I thought this was an excellent choice for the opener. And again, from a personal perspective, I'm very glad that DDP went over. This was a great start to the pay-per-view.
Brian.
I've said this a couple of times I've been on the show that I'm a huge fan of Diamond Dallas Page, and it's interesting to see where he is now because for the past couple of times I've seen him, he's been completely all over the place when it comes to his wrestling abilities. There's a lot of over-exaggeration in his emotions and movement, but now he's more serious, and he had one or two little flops that were more in line with like a comedy match, but for the most part, he kept it relatively serious, and I'm enjoying seeing where he's going at this point in time. With Chavo Guerrero, I agree with what Rory said. He's young, he doesn't really have a lot of flash to him, and they really threw him out to the wolves on this match because the crowd were completely behind Diamond Dallas Page, but they didn't turn on him. So whenever he did hit a couple high spots, the crowd were actually, applauding him, which is completely different what we saw later on with like a Supercut Low match where, the crowd didn't care.
Yeah, I think it was a crowd that largely were just cheering shit they liked. That was mainly moves. And it was mainly to an extent just guys that they knew about. There's a fair few guys on this show that hadn't really, seen much light of day in the last, until the last couple of months. And as Rory mentions, the Page push really started at the beginning of 1995. Your regular viewer of WCW Saturday Night, Page was all over that show. And I think his character's been a bit inconsistent, he had money, then he didn't have money, then he had it again, and now we just kind of forgot. I agree, Roy. I think clearly he is turning into a very solid worker. It helps that Chavo, while Green, was able to bump around for him. Opening match in front of a hot crowd, and he answered some questions tonight. It's another Diamond Dallas Page match in the opener, but I think it's, we've had matches before where it's been him and Johnny B. Bad, and the inclination has been, well, Johnny B. Bad's really good, and Page kind of came along for the ride. Now I think we know that Page is contributing towards these matches. They're going to have to sustain a character with him. As I say, it's been a bit up and down, but he's got a finisher that people like, he's got a moveset that people like, and he's a character that they recognise. If they can get him in some proper programs, I think the only way is up. But yeah, I think my main question coming out of this was, is the crowd into Diamond Dallas Page, or are they just into everything? We will see. Harlan Pete, Sherry and Parker are badgering a typist during a CompuServe live chat. We then followed that with a detailed look at the Outsiders NWO angle. It's about 6 minutes long, but it is really, really good, and it is noteworthy for the only time that Mean Gene Okerlund was on the show. I don't know if we referenced it in the news, but Gene Okerlund has technically left the company at the moment, but that is just because his contract's run out. There is the expectation he will come back. But Mike Tenay does Gene's honours for the rest of the show. We move on to Scott Norton versus Ice Train with Teddy Long. Train starts at an arm lock. Norton levels in with a big shoulder tackle. Train hits a big splash and then a slam. He goes for another slam. Norton moves, then hits a DDT. Train hits a big power slam. Schiavone mentions how good these two were as a tag team. He wasn't wrong. Norton locks in an arm bar. Train's arm was strapped up last month, don't forget. The hold stays in for ages. Long gets on the apron and threatens to throw in the towel, but the ref tells him he can't. Heenan says he's not going to throw in the towel. He keeps it with him so he can shine his head. The ref has a mic with him. It's apparently a submission match I completely missed. Train hits another horrible looking splash, brutal that. Norton gets up as Train sells the suffering of an elbow. Train jumps at Norton. Norton catches him and slams him as almost a release spinebuster. He follows that with a Boston Crab. Heenan says, "Don't worry about Teddy Long. Rip off the arm." Long gets on the apron again, so Norton grabs him. The distraction enables Train to lock in the full Nelson. Norton collapses down to the mat and then submits by tapping. Bryan.
Not my favorite match on the show, but it was a good hoss battle. I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on in this match that caught my attention. There's a number of cosplayers in the audience. I don't know if you guys caught that. During this bout, there's a fake Razor and a fake Hollywood Hogan walking around in the crowd, getting the attention of the camera. And then the previous
was the fake Razor Rick Bogner?
No, he was on the other show at that time, wasn't he? He was signed with the WWF. Right. Yeah, but
that guy. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
So that was kind of fun. I'm trying to think. Dusty Rhodes had some real oddball calls during this bout because it's an I Quit match. It's going to who was a ref? I can't remember who the ref was. We had the microphone the entire time. Ask him, trying to quit the match, but that doesn't actually happen, which is so weird. At the very end, Norton ends up tapping out. But back to my original point, Dusty at one point brings up that he's got to he's got to quit for the other guy if he's a good ventriloquist. And they both look at him like, "What are you saying, ventriloquist?" Like, yeah, ventriloquist. If he's a good ventriloquist, he can quit for him. And I was just on the ground laughing how ridiculous this match was at that point. But good power moves. I like how Tony Schiavone called a standing spine buster a power bomb, which confused me. But I don't know. I give it a 4 out of 10.
Yeah, but more of your Dusty Rhodes impression, please, Bryan. Rory.
First off, a fake Razor. What a ridiculous idea. This was all right, I suppose. I said in my little preamble that it was good that a lot of the mid-card matches were given a good 15 minutes. This only had 7 minutes, and I think that was perfectly ample for the quite simple story they were trying to tell. Two big guys who used to be in a big guy tag team hitting each other with big guy power moves to try and get a big guy submission. And that's got its place, and it was perfectly serviceable. Nothing really to write home about, but it was harmless enough. They both tried their best. Other than that really odd looking splash, there were no real botches, and we saw somebody win a match with a full Nelson for the first time since probably about 1973. So all's good.
Yeah, I think you two summed it up pretty well. Two big guys just beating piss out of each other for 5 or 6 minutes in a match. Rory, I don't recall this being a submission match until I saw the microphone.
Yep, I don't. Or did they? Just thinking of, was it? Did they have? Was it there in the caption when they showed the wide angle shot before the match? I can't remember now. Put it this way, I wouldn't say that they didn't make particularly great play of it beforehand. I agree with that.
No, they didn't. And also didn't really feel like they thought it out. Like the ref has a microphone, then Norton submits by tapping. A little bit. Nice match though. Probably the worst of the first half dozen, but that's more compliments how good the rest are. Anyway, move on. Next up, it's Juventud Barrera versus Conan with Jimmy Hart for the Mexican Heavyweight Championship. Mike Tenay's out on commentary. Juventud's night hardly starts off well as he trips over the steps while getting too excited. Judging by his new gimmick, they seem to have ruined Conan into a stereotype. They offer a handshake, but Conan just starts beating him. Juvi rolls him through, but Conan picks up with a released German suplex. Hart distracts the ref, so Conan just picks up Juvi and dumps him over the top to the outside. Juvi goes to the top rope of the other ring, does a triple jump into a takedown back in the main ring. Guerrero hits the top rope onto Conan. Guerrero jumps onto the guardrail, jumps onto Conan, who catches him into a powerbomb. That's really nice. Back in the ring, Conan leathers Juvi with a clothesline. They reference recent rumours about Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. You can hear more about that on the hotline. Surprise, surprise. Juvi catches Conan with a head scissors between the rings and Conan flips over. Conan drops Juventud on his back and then goes for a leg lock. Juvi goes for a springboard moonsault off of the ropes, but he basically missed. Conan responds with a big-ass powerbomb. Guerrero takes a couple of German suplexes. He retreats to the outside for a breather. Juvi returns with a nice high-angle drop kick. We get a couple of release pin attempts. Hoovy hits a springboard spin kick for a 2. Juventud goes for a jumping something. Conan catches his legs and flings him over for a reverse German suplex of sorts. Conan dangles off of the second ropes. Barrera hits a front flip, but Conan gets his leg tangles in the rope for a 2. Schiavone praises Nick Patrick, which probably means something is coming. Hoovy hits a 450 splash from the top, only gets a 2. Returns to the top, hits a spinning something, but again, only for a 2. Juventud hangs out on the top. Conan again grabs his legs and slams him down. Conan puts him on top for a brainbuster. That looked really nice, but they're pushing ECW here for a huge amount of big false finishes. Conan sets up for the power drop, hits it, and that will do that. Rory.
Well, this is certainly very ambitious. I'll give them that. It felt at times that the miss counter was higher than the hit counter, though. And Hoovy in particular, I don't know whether he was a bit too eager to please, but he noticeably messed up a lot of stuff. To say that the die was cast out by falling over the steps when they tried to get in the ring in the first place. And I couldn't really overlook that, so I did take marks off of that. My issue with Conan is that at the moment and even the commentators made play of this, is that he's neither fish nor fowl at this point in time. I'm not sure if he's a lucha libre guy trapped in a catch-as-catch-can wrestler's body or the other way round. And it sometimes looks a little bit awkward. I don't think he really knows the answer to that question either. But despite the thematic problems with this match, they did their best and pretty much succeeded in overriding those by just giving us big, super moves that pop the crowd. That one towards the end, which was kind of a super reverse neck brain buster. I mean, that's a finish in anybody's book. I mean, that was an incredible move. Although the drop bomb is pretty good as well. So yeah, they messed a few things up. They probably a bit more than they could chew, but they really went for it, and they probably deserved their fortune in the end, really. So not perfect, but a great effort from both men, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
Bryan.
I agree. The whole match was great fun. I think it was Tenay who compared that style to a car crash, and I couldn't agree more. There was a lot of stuff that they were trying to attempt that didn't really pan out the way that they wanted. But to me, Conan as this new Cholo gangster character paired up with Jimmy Hart seems a bit strange, especially when he's out on the outside yelling at the camera, "Arriba la raza." And Hart laughs maniacally and says the exact same thing, repeats, these Mexican slang terms. It's a bit wonky, right? I'm not the only one that notices this.
The whole Conan thing's really odd. As I say, they seem to have turned him into a stereotype, basically.
Yeah, but he's still technically part of the Dungeon of Doom. When he walked out, he had the Dungeon of Doom music, so they're kind of becoming a face of WCW, but you got this guy with the AAA Mexican World Heavyweight Championship. So I enjoyed it for what it was, but it definitely doesn't hold up when you have Benoit versus Jericho next, when you have Rey Mysterio versus Super Calo in the same card.
Yeah, and that's going to be my feeling when we get to those matches down the road, is that the one thing that made those matches early in the year so good was that they stood out. But if anything, like we raised the bar so high, it was almost like, okay, what else are you bringing to the table? Like, in a show full of shit matches, this stands out. In a show full of really good matches, like, well, it's just another match. And that's kind of harsh criticism. But again, it doesn't help that, one, they had Conan as this babyface that wasn't really going anywhere and they couldn't really find the right opponent for. So they turned him heel. As they say, they've kind of turned him heel in a way that's a bit kind of disappointing. They've got Juventud Barrera, who's really exciting, but isn't really over. His moves are over, but he's not. Put a guy in a mask. Not that easy. And with a match like this, Rory, in a weird way, as good as it wasn't that memorable.
No, it's not something we'll be talking about for much long afterwards. At times it did feel like a collection of moves, a collection of magnificent moves, which had me applauding a lot of times, don't get me wrong. But that's probably my one criticism of, inverted commas, lucha style. That you're going to get a bag of amazing moves, but pretty lucky if you really feel that they mean anything. And I think a lot of times that was the case here. But again, those moves were superb, and all credit to them for that. Taking nothing away from them there.
Bryan, any more?
This is what, Juventude's second appearance in WCW? Didn't he make his debut on the Nitro previous to this?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is his second bout in, and I agree with Rory. I'll applaud a lot of the stuff he's doing, but even on this Nitro debut, there were just so many times where he attempted something and completely botches it and lands in these awkward ways. I don't know how long this guy can last with this car crash style.
Not the only guy we've been discussing that about recently. You can hear something similar about that in both WWF and ECW shows this month. But yeah, I mean, it's just put it this way, right? We are complaining about what essentially is a really good match. And in another era, e.g. last year, this is Hacksaw Jim Duggan against VK Wall Street or something like that. Heaven forbid. So, be careful what you wish for, but it does, when you put on a show this good, it's like, okay, what are you guys offering that we're not getting later in the card? But that's only going to come with time, as we'll see. Speaking of coming with time, move on next to Chris Jericho versus Chris Benoit, and that kind of theme gets continued here. So we're in Horseman country. Jericho is the babyface who nobody's ever seen before, really, up against Chris Benoit, a member of the Four Horsemen. So no fucking surprise that Benoit is a big babyface in this match. They start by exchanging slaps. The crowd are all over Benoit. He levels Jericho with a big left, and there's a big contingent of fans with Horseman shirts opposite the hard camera. Benoit hits a big slam, then locks in a horrible-looking vertical Boston Crab. The crowd is dead when Jericho is on offense, I've got in my notes. Jericho vaults off the second ropes to hit a drop kick, sending Benoit off of the apron to the outside. He tried the same thing again with a back elbow, but got it quite badly wrong and hit his shoulder on the apron. Jericho hits a nice powerbomb for a 2. They stand and start exchanging slaps. Benoit gets on the apron and hits a back suplex, sending Jericho to the floor. Benoit hits a lovely diving headbutt from the top, takes a bit of time making the cover, and Jericho kicks out. Jericho gets a roll-up for a 2, but that just seems to piss off Benoit. Jericho almost steals it with a pin counter. He then hits a belly-to-belly with a bridge for a 2. Benoit goes for a tombstone. Jericho rolls it over and hits one of his own. Jericho declines going for a pin, instead hitting a moonsault from the second rope. He misses but lands on his feet, then leathers Benoit with a right. A Frankensteiner from the top from Jericho for a 2. We then go on the top rope. Benoit hits a back superplex, and that will be enough for the 3. Rory.
Chris Benoit rules all before him. And again, although it was maybe because of familiarity, but the cheers he got, he deserved. You name it, Chris Benoit can do it in the ring. He's astounding. He is the most complete wrestler in North America right now. Is the absolute best performer? Debatable, but the best wrestler, if you're putting, saying, come on, is he the best wrestler? The answer to that is yes. I felt a bit sorry for Chris Jericho here. One, because he clearly wasn't getting the desired crowd reactions, because I don't think a lot of people there knew who he was. But B, perhaps more importantly, was that he was very, very white meat, happy, clappy. I'm just happy to be here. Golly go shucks, babyface. That wasn't going to cut it in front of this crowd, and they let him have it quite badly. And 2, again, perhaps even more than Juventud, he seemed to be suffering from nerves in the early going. He wasn't quite there when he was on offense. He really picked it up for the last 6 or 7 minutes, and we got some absolutely terrific stuff. I'm sure that a bit further down the line, when Jericho's got a bit more experience in mainstream North American wrestling, and possibly there's some title on the line, or at some point, these two can really absolutely tear it up. What we got was very, very, very good, but I reckon they could do even better in the future when everything clicks. But Benoit is just the man.
Bryan.
Jericho seems to be an all right wrestler, but in this particular match, it seemed the whole thing was just going to be a Benoit killing. I did not expect anything else, but they actually did have give Jericho a bit of offense in this bout, so I was actually pleasantly surprised. I assumed that the crowd was just there to go crazy for Benoit, but I think that there was a slight bit of applause there for Jericho here and there. He had a couple of moves from the top rope that got the crowd into it, especially that backwards elbow into Benoit's face. That just the nasty thud it made. It was so sickening, and it looked very painful, but to Benoit's credit, he immediately got up and rolled back into the ring like it was nothing. So I enjoyed it. I think this was a Jericho showcase match, a show that maybe he's actually someone who can hang with the big boys, quote unquote. And I'm actually interested to see what happens to him in the future, where this guy goes.
I kind of felt a bit sorry for him. In the, to one extent or another, I think they quite clearly laid out a match that was meant to be quite even, that was meant to kind of get over Jericho. But in Horseman country, he didn't have a hope. And once that kind of became clear, he was just playing second fiddle in, what shit can Chris Benoit get in 15 minutes that's going to pop the crowd the most. This was a really good match. Really, really good. I think we've seen Jericho in ECW enough to know that he is very good. But also, we didn't see much character in ECW. Not that he was there a lot. But he's come in here, and we saw that his debut match with Alex Wright, which he didn't want. It's what's the dullest babyface thing you can do? Not accept victory on debut because your opponent gets injured. That's like in an era where the biggest babyface in the company, the NWO, those guys are walking around trashing up the place. A guy that's got honor isn't particularly the most babyface guy in the room. But I kind of felt for him here in that Benoit was just really over. And Rory, as you say, he's just fucking brilliant. There's no other word to describe it. Like he's been around now in this timeline for about 2 years now. And I think we are going to discuss later in the show about guys that WCW are going to need to move into a position that can oppose the Four Horsemen, oppose the NWO, sorry. Rory, I can see Benoit being a guy that people will get behind. He's so good that he's like a modern day Arn Anderson almost. A modern day.
That's why people would get behind him.
A more contemporary Arn Anderson, as good as Arn Anderson still is.
Nice save. But my only slight, and it's a very, very slight question mark, would be his mic skills. But I think when he's been on the mic, I think he's been okay. He's not a disastrous promo by any means. There are people out there in higher positions than him who are far, far worse than he is. But if you did have if it was something you were going to query, then at least you've got people in the Horsemen who can back him up on the mic for him anyway, if you wanted to go that route. But yeah, just seriously, just wherever you do it, just push this guy right now. Push him yesterday.
Bryan, thoughts on Benoit's suitability up the card?
I think once he can move away from the Horsemen, if that's something they would ever do, I think that'd be something that could happen. I don't know if he can stand one-on-one with guys like the NWO, but I don't know. He has a lot of promise, and if you notice the pack of Horsemen fans in the front row, like they were just worshiping the ground this guy walked on. So there is something there. Yeah,
and you think forward to the main event, you think, fuck, forget your story. Why don't you just put this guy in the main event? But anyway, we will see. We have our next two, Super Callow versus Rey Mysterio Jr. for the WCW Cruiserweight title. Callow slams Mysterio into the turnbuckle, then hits a nice running power slam. Someone near an effects Mike shouts, boring. Lots of flip counters. Mysterio hits the head scissors off the top. Callow hits a bounce powerbomb via the top rope. Mysterio on the outside, Callow hits a high angle dropkick off the top rope. Mysterio hits his head on the concrete hard. That kind of been fun. Mysterio still on the floor. Callow hits a flip dive off over the top and lands on him. Callow hits a Frankenstein off of the top, but only gets a 2. He locks in an arm scissors, gets then a surfboard stretch. Mysterio attempts to pull Callow over the top. Randy Allenson actually tries to pull Callow back in, which looks quite comical. Mysterio then hits a plancha on the floor. Mysterio comes off of the top, but Callow hits a drop kick. We then go into the other ring. Callow comes off of the top, and whips Mysterio's arms as he falls to the floor. Mysterio then hits the head scissors off the apron to the floor, then hits a flip dive to the outside. Mysterio pivots off the ropes on both rings, hits a Frankensteiner, and rolls it through for the win. Bryan.
Even though this is Super Callow's debut pay-per-view bout in WCW, I'm just kind of surprised how bad he is compared to Ray. I mean, he's okay. I'm not trying to talk down against him, but some of the moves he has just look a little too awkward, a little too stiff, and they even bring up the fact that he has more of a solid Lucha Libre style as opposed to Rey Mysterio's Lucha Libre Japanese hybrid style. And Mysterio is just on another planet when it comes to Super Callow. I like his mask, I like his look, but I don't know, it just seems like a waste of an opportunity, especially when he got a lot of other better cruiserweights in WCW right now.
Rory.
Yeah, it's absolute testament to Ray here that Super Callow, who I don't think I'd heard of him before, even before I started watching this pay-per-view, to be honest with you. Had he been mentioned on TV before? I'm not sure.
I think he wrestled on TV. If it wasn't before, it was right after.
Right, okay.
But yeah, he hasn't been around long, let's say that.
Okay. I think it's testament to Ray, especially Ray obviously wearing a mask, that he was able to get me fairly invested in Super Callow by his excellent selling, which I say wearing a mask is no mean feat. Because Callow, he dominated pretty much the entire first 2/3 of the match. And his offense was fine, but it was somewhat unspectacular. And again, I agree, he looked a little, let's say, casual with some of his manoeuvres as well. But it was fine. It was probably a bit too long for what he was capable of doing. When Ray got back onto offense, I mean, no need I say more. I mean, the man it's phenomenal. The things he can do, the way he can do them, and the way he makes them mean something, to go back to a point I made earlier. I mean, this guy could be an absolute superstar if they play him right. I think he's great. I'm glad he won. And that finish, double springboard into a Rana. God, hats off. Fantastic.
Rory, coming back to a theme we mentioned a couple of matches ago, if two guys have a great wrestling match, but it doesn't matter, the audience don't know who they are, is it really a great match?
Again, in a way, that's kind of sort of the point I was making with Benoit Jericho, really, because the work for the most part was absolute A-grade stuff.
But they were into one of those guys.
That's true. But the match wasn't really. To take the credit out just for a second, that was still just a match on a event. It didn't really count for anything. At least this one had a title on the line. But I do get your point. I think especially in North America, where work rate isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all for many of your casual viewers, then you've got to have that something extra to make it a bona fide 5-star match. Unless the work you put in is 20 minutes of absolute technical perfection, and very few people are capable of that. So you've got to give, or at least be capable of giving a little bit more. I agree with the tenor of your point there, yeah.
Bryan, is this kind of come back to what we said before? You've now got 2 hours of live television. Let's flesh out these characters. Because right now, for once, and it's not something people say all that often, it feels like the work rate is about there. They just need to get some characters behind so people can get invested in these guys before they're out there.
I completely agree. And to praise Super Callow, he had Ray on the outside and did I think it's like a over-the-top rope senton splash to Ray on the outside, and the crowd did not react whatsoever. There wasn't even a slight applause for it. It just was dead. And it was actually kind of sad because that was a pretty spectacular move. Like, he nailed it perfectly, but no one cared. And I think that's a bad place to be on a pay-per-view.
And it's also the thing that, you know, the slight concern is that the reaction to these guys in an environment like this will be, no one cared, we'd better do more. It's like, no, that's not the answer. Mm-hmm. The answer to people not caring is we need to get some people investing in these guys before the bell rings, because then it'll matter more. And I think the other thing as well is that we say, what does it matter? There was a title on the line, I should reiterate. But the title doesn't really matter at the moment. It kind of helps that they've kind of sent Regal away to defend the TV title. He's not really been around. And that Flair, I think, is still the United States heavyweight champion, even though he's not really doing anything with it. Kind of helps that. But yeah, they just, you know, they need more time. They're doing bits, and I suspect on Saturday night they're doing a bit more, but it's like Nitro's your main show. Would it kill you? You know, we talk about them building up guys. They gave bloody Glacier about 2 minutes later in the month just to tell people about where he was from and where all the style came together. And guess what? When Glacier's entrance started, people fucking reacted. Like, it's not like this needs to be a sustained 6-month build. Just give us a bit to cling on to, and they might react a bit more. Again, on another show, we'd have been going, God, thank God for a great match. But on this show, with everything else, it was like, you know, good action, but, we've seen good action throughout the show. That would have been my main criticism. Still a very good match. On another show, this would have really, really stood out. As it was good. But that's the overriding concern. Mysterio's been around a few months now. Give us something on that character. Anyway, we move on to 4 guys that we know quite a bit about. It's the Nasty Boys, Bryan Knobbs and Jerry Sags versus Harlem Heat, Booker T and Stevie Ray, with Cal Robert Parker and Sherry for the WCW World Tag Team titles. Stevie Ray starts out with Sags in the corner. Sags hits a big clothesline for a 2. Sags gets antsy with Sherry and Parker, which whips up the crowd. Knobbs hits a back elbow. Knobbs just unloads on Booker T. I don't know about before, but I can finally tell Booker and Stevie apart, as Stevie is significantly thicker. Sag hits a neck breaker. We go for a pit stop, but Sherry climbs on the apron and the distraction seems to stop it. Booker T hits a big scissors kick onto Knobbs, then get a standing exchange. Booker levels Knobbs, then goes after Sags. The action breaks down. Sags goes after Sherry and stumbles through the middle ropes, chasing after her. Booker goes for a jumping side kick, but Knobbs ducks and Booker goes sprawling to the floor. Knobbs finally gets his hands on Sherry and the crowd pop for that. Knobbs hits Booker with a pile driver for a 2. Sags goes to the top. Parker knocks him off balance. Sags goes after Parker, but Ray runs him over. Booker hits a scissors kick on Sags, which falls him to the outside. Ray holds up Sags so Sherry can take some shots. Sags rallies with a double face plant. He looks to the hot tag and he's finally able to get it. Knobbs runs wild for a bit, but all four men are in the ring. Knobbs sets on the top. Parker goes on the apron. Sags blocks Parker, but Sherry gets in the ring and levels Knobbs with a cane. Booker, dazed, pins Knobbs, and that's enough to retain. Rory.
Goes back to what you just said, Bob. This match, on its own 2 feet, was probably just about serviceable, marginally above TV quality. The crowd elevated this level upon level. They were so into the Nasty Boys. Beats me, but hey, Nasty Boys are babyfaces, I suppose, and they were getting a huge section of cheers throughout the entire match. And that helped keep me invested in something which I otherwise might not have been my number 1 pick of interest for this particular card. And I think that probably maybe even enhanced the work in the ring a little bit as well. Both teams probably up their rolls about another 10%, which is excellent. And it was good. Probably, again, the maximum amount of time you'd want to see these 2 guys go at it for. It was fleshed out a bit by the shenanigans with the Colonel, who I'm still a complete mark for, by the way, and Sherry. They did their bit and they carried out what they needed to do well as well. The ending was a bit, I've seen this 1,000 times before, but I suppose you're going to get that with this particular troupe. So yeah, decent to good action, but it shows the importance of a crowd who actually care about the people involved.
Yeah, we did the whole thing about 4 or 5 months ago with the, let's look at the run of WCW tag team title matches we covered on this show and how many of them ended in screwy finishes. This is just another one of those. Bryan.
I've always liked the Nasties. I know what to expect when it comes to them. They're just garbage wrestlers when the tag team division. But I've always liked just their look, their vibe. I've just been a fan of them. I don't even know why. In this particular match, nothing that really stood out to me. Just a typical Nasties type of match. Crowd's going crazy. That did elevate it a bit. But just to have it to the point where their victory gets taken away from them by a cane shot, yeah, it's just the usual standard. I'm actually surprised that Parker and Sherry are still with the Harlem Heat. I'm surprised that this unity is still hanging on, still going strong at this point.
Yeah, I think they kind of hope we've just overlooked the fact that Parker and Sherry probably shouldn't be together anymore, and there isn't really a reason why the Heat need either of them in a storyline sense, because Sherry massively helped this match. I mean, the crowd were largely all over it anyway, but Sherry kept it going, built the heat, able to get some sympathy onto Sags. It all came together. And it helped that all four guys are just really good. You know, and not that, you know, Knobs and Sags aren't going to win any awards for being great workers, but they're good brawlers. And we talk about, you know, Mysterio and Super Calo not being over and Jericho not being over. If you were to come to a WCW product fresh, or you didn't know any of the guys, any of them at all, I think if there's one act on this show that you would get more quickly than any of the others, it's the Nasty Boys. They're big, brash, you know, they're barroom brawlers. That's obvious, right? And they wrestle like that too. They wrestle like people that fight rather than wrestle. So that helps when it comes to the Nasty Boys being characters that people can get. One, that they've been around for ages and we kind of know who they are and we've seen it all before. But two, they're very obvious acts and they're quite likeable, even though it now looks like they turned them heel. And the Harlem Heat are just really athletic. They're really impressive too. And if you're cold to those guys, you might not be angry at them, but you are angry at the two guys on the outside that are helping them win. You know, Rory, I think we kind of mentioned that there might be some questions behind Parker and Sherry, but Parker and Sherry are still really helping this act.
Definitely. As I say, in this particular match, I think they needed to be there just to give us and take us up to the 13, 14 minute mark that they're actually earmarked for it. I think it might have got a bit more of a struggle to watch without them. They're just gold. This angle has been going on a year now. I think it was at the last Fall Brawl we first started getting these two together, was it? Possibly even before that. That's the first one I can remember.
I seem to recall Bash at the Beach last summer. I seem to recall both of these teams being involved with Regal and Eaton. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think it was. I think it Fall Brawl.
It may be predated that as well, but that's I recall that.
I wouldn't be surprised. But if you've got something going and it's going good, then don't stop it. These two are fantastic in their roles. Sherry is a heat magnet, and the Colonel as the Southern gentleman without the gentleman bit. He's just fantastic. I say. I think he's brilliant at playing that role. I wouldn't even think about breaking these, even though from a storyline perspective, do the Heat really need them? Maybe not, but it works for me. Keep it going. They're great.
Yeah, I really like this. I like both teams. As we say, I think Parker and Sherry is a bit disjointed. And there may become a time where they want to turn the Heat face. I can see that in the future. If we're going to talk about the Nasty Boys turning heel, we'll talk about the Steiners potentially turning heel, and the fact that there's going to be quite a new tag team on the scene very, very soon, e.g. next month. The Outsiders, they might want some baby faces to go up against them. I can see the Heat being near the top of that list in that they're so impressive athletically that I think they'll get over. And so I think there's a necessity as to why they need these heel acts with them at the moment, and that's to keep them heels. But they're both really impressive, and I'm a big fan of the Nasty Boys. As I say, it's quite a simple act. Two fat guys who fight. It's not much more complex than that.
It's in their name. They're two Nasty Boys. That's it.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. Even more simple than how they look, what they're called. It's not a complicated act, but that's not a criticism, that's a positive. And that they're very easy to get behind, both either as a babyface or if you want to turn the heels, it looks like they've done. Either on that side as well. It just works. And we talk about this card, Bryan, is it fair to say this match probably stands alongside the previous 5 we've seen, 5 or 6?
Only due to the crowd just getting into it completely. To be quite honest, when I saw this coming up, I actually considered maybe I'll get up and go do some laundry and maybe come back and check in on it. But as soon as I saw things kind of starting to heat up pretty quickly, I stuck around and watched the entirety of it.
Yeah, I mean, Rory, fair to say one of the more memorable matches on the card, on a card of very good matches.
Definitely. In the end, props to everybody involved.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. Shame about the shitty finish, but it's WCW Tag Team Division. I think we've got to live with that now. Anyway, yeah, I'll mention it now because it will get kind of buzzed over in our TV reports. But the Public Enemy do win the tag titles a couple of weeks later on Nitro. I don't think they're going to do Public Enemy and the Outsiders at the next show, in part because I think Johnny Grunge is going to have to have surgery on his knee. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but that's there. We've mentioned that in the TVs. Ric Flair is flogging Fall Brawl t-shirts. He's a babyface now. I've got in my notes. I think he just is. We get a promo from Savage. Noteworthy that Mike Tenay is doing the interview and not Mean Gene Oakland. Next up, it's Randy Savage versus the Giant. Giant charges into the ring. Savage knocks him off the apron, so Giant pulls him out and they brawl on the aisleway. Savage goes for a body slam and Giant's weight just flattens him. Savage comes out the corner and Giant sends him to the mat. Giant hits a backbreaker, then locks in a back submission. Everyone in the crowd is looking camera left. Not clear at what they're looking at, and I don't think that led to anything. I think it was just something in the crowd. He then locks in a Boston Crab. Giant catches Savage off the top rope and slams him down. Savage hits a bulldog from the top. Giant kicks out so hard, Savage gets some air, which pops the crowd. Savage hits a 1-2 kick onto a kneeling Giant, then hits a body slam, and the place explodes. Here comes Hulk Hogan. Savage hits an elbow from the top. Hogan pulls Giant half out of the ring. Savage chases Hogan up the aisleway, but it's a trap. Savage ducks a Scott Hall shot, but Nash leathers Savage with a chair. You think that'd be a DQ, but it turns out Nick Patrick is distracted by Giant in the ring. The Outsiders and Hogan roll Savage back into the ring, and Giant pins him for the win. Bryan.
I'm actually curious to see where this whole angle is going to play out at with Nick Patrick. The previous Nitros, you had him actually cut a promo against people who were tearing down, and all the haters out there tearing down his calls and have a disagreement with how he does things in the ring. It's interesting to think that the NWO have a ref in their back pocket for times like this, even though it's, I don't know, I guess it's a little cheesy, but I guess it's a necessary thing. Giant versus Macho Man. Macho is pretty much a rabid dog throughout the entire thing who will not quit. The Giant just kind of picks him off and throws him around the ring for a good 5 minutes. It wasn't a great match by any stretch of the imagination, but the crowd were super hot into this thing. And whenever Savage picked up the Giant for the body slam, it was like Hogan Andre at WrestleMania 3, brother.
Rory.
Very briefly, I thought Savage's promo beforehand was excellent. When he called himself the evil necessity, I thought that was a great line. I wanted to get something good out of the way nice and early. In fact, that said, this match it served its purpose. It was to try to build some sympathy for Savage. It was more angle advancement than a match, if I'm being honest. What we got in the 7 minutes was okay. I think we've actually seen better performances in the ring from the Giant than this, if I'm being brutally honest. Up until about the 5 minute mark, it was a Randy Savage match, actually get beaten down. But this time he didn't just get up and hit the elbow and get the win. Not that I was expecting him to get a clean win here by any means. And that body slam, and you're right, I mean, the crowd went nuts for it. I watched it, I was like, wow, that's impressive. Looking back now, though, I wonder if maybe they should have saved that for somewhere down the line when it meant just a tiny bit more. I don't know. And as soon as Hogan came down the aisle, you just knew where this one was going. I thought Savage looked a little bit stupid, actually, because Hogan leads him down to the curtain, and Savage knows that one of Hall or Nash is going to be there, and he ducks Hall's punch before he even throws it. Okay, that's fine. But then he's completely prone for Nash to hit him with a chair. You can't win them all, I guess. And from there, it was just completely academic. And Savage was prone in the ring, which we all knew really from as soon as Hogan came out, this was going to end anyway. So as a match, not really much going on, but as angle advancement to try to give us a bit more going in towards Savage Hogan at Halloween Havoc, I can cope with it.
Yeah, a lot of my comments about this are going to tie into what we discussed following the main event, so I'll keep this fairly short. Yeah, not the greatest Giant outing we've seen, but, you know, to an extent it's the Giant. I don't think he's much better than this. And Savage himself isn't particularly in a position anymore where I think he can carry this kind of match either. That being said, star power helped. It wasn't long enough where it got boring. And the crowd, and they pop for that body slam. As for the finish, you know, we're treading very, very close to dumb babyface territory here. Very, very close. You know, I could say more, but it will all wrap into what I'm going to say after the main event, so I'll leave it there now.
We are now just minutes away from the War Games, and decision time is here. Ric Flair, which member of the Four Horsemen has been chosen to replace the departed Sting in the War Games matchup against the New World Order?
Tonight, we are in the house, the Horseman belt. Stinger, no Sting. It's Luger. It's Double A, and it's an HMR. The Horsemen have stepped aside. You hear that, Gene? You hear it? That's the ambulance coming down the highway to get the outsiders. You hear it? That's the medics wheeling in the carts. Very shortly, the Horsemen kick ass. Woo!
The fact is, Luger, you lost a friend. We lost a partner. WCW lost an icon. But the fact of the matter is, if you want something done right in this life, you were a horseman once. We're just going to do it by ourselves. Sting or no Sting.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a second. Wait 1 second. Start it again, brother. I've been waiting 6 days for this. I got to hear this, but you better make it short and sweet.
All I got is, I'll make it real short. All I got to say is it was not me on Monday night. It wasn't me, Lex.
Well, I'll tell you what. We got a War Games right now. I saw you. I looked you right in the face before you cheap shot at me. And Stinger, I know it was you. I can't believe you, and I don't believe you.
If you can't believe me, then so be it. I'll see you in a while.
I hope we do.
Luger, you're a lean, mean wrestling machine. Tonight, we walk the aisle.
Mike Tenay is backstage with Flair, Luger, Arn, Woman and Elizabeth. He asks which member of the Horsemen will be replacing Sting. Flair calls him Gene, which is as good a sign as any that Flair's phoning in these days. Arn says Luger was a Horseman, so they're good. They can go with 3. Here comes Sting. He says Monday night wasn't him. Luger says he doesn't believe him, and he says he saw on Monday that it was him. Brian, we're going to have a much bigger discussion about Sting later in the show, but what did you think about this chapter?
It was kind of just laughable. It's Lex Luger talking to his best friend. He if anyone would know if an imposter would wear the Sting makeup, it would be the Lex Luger, but I don't know. It's confusing. And to go back to that previous Nitro where you had this, I don't know. It's just laughable at this point.
Rory.
That line, I looked in your eyes. Well, come on, Lex. You've only known this guy for about a decade. Come on now. But you did, at the time, I thought this was just very stupid and borderline intelligence insulting. It did at least play into what we got on our screens about 20 minutes later. So I'll let it slide to a degree, but I will say that I agree with the review that's made it into the torch about this. That did seem somewhat under-rehearsed, and I thought Sting's parting line of "I'll see you in a while," like he was just nipping down to the shops to buy a paper or something. That could have had a bit more portent to it, but it had its issues, but it was okay setting up what we got later on, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm doing this a lot tonight, but I feel like, I can better discuss it when we've got the context of what's to follow. As it was, I mean, let's look at this in the way that in the context of what had been presented and without being able to look forward as to what follows. On Monday night, we saw we'll discuss that in a bit, so I'll save that bit. But on Monday night, people saw what they believed to be Sting and what was presented to them as being Sting. And what actually happened was a lot of people just turned off, as happened. They got to Sunday, and I kind of thought, okay, if they're going to present it as Sting having turned, surely in a match of this magnitude, in a match where in a match where the Horsemen agreed that 4 Horsemen on their own probably wouldn't be enough to defeat the NWO, and that they said, yeah, we're going to need Sting and Luger because we need guys that have been there before and that can do it. If the match was that important, why didn't the Horsemen have anyone else? And forget that, why not just use Benoit? I mean, forget all the rest of it. So there was that. That was a bit weird. And I'm saying we can go with 3. Well, I mean, I know they hadn't established who the NWO's 4th guy was, but you can sure as shit bet they're going to have one. And then, Sting comes out, and for what could be a very, very kind of defining moment in Sting's character in the next 6 months, say, it was all a bit wooden. Under-rehearsed, yeah, I'd give you that. I think there's more underprepared. As in, one thing we're going to discuss when we get to the promo that Sting cuts the following night is that they needed a much, much more watertight story here. And Sting just coming back and saying, yeah, it wasn't me. And Luger saying, I saw you. I knew it was you. That's a bit weak. I mean, it's less about seeing him and know it was you. What was the motivation behind believing it? We've got, it feels like they're both dumb baby faces. That's even worse. Anyway, we'll discuss this thing more a bit once we've got a bit more context. Anyway, here's Michael Buffer. He's literally got an A4 sheet of notes to explain the rules. And if it's clear, if you've not heard me review a Fall Brawl match, War Games match before, I'm not entirely sold on the concept. Anyway, move on to the main event. It's Hollywood Hogan, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall as Team WO with an unknown 4th member versus Team WCW, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson and Lex Luger. We're in Horseman country, so Flair's name gets a big reaction. DiBiase comes out with Scott Hall, and he's also carrying a spray paint. Arn comes out for WCW. The other 5 or 6 are actually backstage, which unlike previous War Games where they hang around on the outside. And I actually quite like that change. I think it's an improvement visually on the guys just hanging around doing fuck all. It's better that they're backstage. It adds a bit more drama. Anyway. Here we go. Hall starts out with some big rights. Arn gets him in the corner and unloads. This is largely uncoordinated back and forth so far. A scrap, you might call it. I quite like that. Nick Patrick says to Arn Anderson, I can ring the bell. I can stop it right now. No, you can't. We just had a page of notes explaining why you can't do that. Anyway. Tony breaks the news, shock horror that the NWO won the coin toss. Why am I not surprised? We go to the third person with Arn having Hall in a single leg crab. Here comes Kevin Nash. Arn fights, but he can't hold them off. It's 2 versus 1 with Hall and Nash. Luger either misses his cue or jumps the gun, but he's out about 20 seconds too soon. Anyway, the numbers are level. He takes down Nash and Hall with running right hands. Luger darts Hall's head off the cage. Arn comes to and starts unloading on Hall. Out for the NWO third, it's Hogan. With Nash and Hall down, Luger and Arn get some offense in, but the numbers game quickly catches up with them. A large "We Want Flair" chant breaks out. Out to make it 3-on-3, he stands in the first ring and goads the NWO to come over to his side. Hogan jumps the gap, so Flair gyrates. I mean, well, what else would you do? Flair unloads some strikes, and the fans are all over this. Nash and Hall come over, so Flair low blows them both. Out comes Sting. Clearly not the real Sting. The fake Sting starts attacking. The fans chant a "We Want Sting" chant, although the commentators think it's the actual Sting. We get all 7 men in the one ring. Hogan is after Flair by the cage. Fake Sting does Sting's splash in every corner. It's 4-on-4 and out comes the real Sting. Real Sting, unloads on everyone and does splashes in the corners. Sting does his job, mouths off at Luger and then just leaves. It's back to 3-on-4. Hogan hits a big boot and a leg drop on Luger. Fake Sting puts in a scorpion deathlock on Luger. Hogan puts in a chinlock, and that's the end of that. The action does continue. We'll come back to that in a bit. Rory.
First things first, this is my first opportunity to say this. I don't like War Games matches either, because A, as you alluded to in your write-up, Bob, the heels always win the coin toss. They always have. They always will. And B, the rules that the match can't actually end until everybody's in the ring means that there's no real drama that you can really build up for the first 20 minutes or so. Watching people punch each other and throw each other into the cage gets a bit wearying after a while. On the Great American Bash tours about 10 years ago, when you get to see all the big stars in one big bloody battle coming to your town, then I can see what would have made a bit more sense. But now I'm not a fan. But it looks like it's here to stay. So we have to deal with it. And before we get to the storyline, as War Games matches go, it was okay. It was lots of people punching each other and throwing each other into a cage. Flair tried to make a bit more of it because he's Ric Flair. But that was pretty much it until we got the whole Sting story that I thought was actually really well told. Nobody believed that Cobra was the real Sting. The fact that a "We Want Sting" chant went up almost as soon as he actually got in the ring proved that. I'll give him about a 7 out of 10 for the Stinger splash and about a 3 out of 10 for the Shriek thing. And when the real Sting came down, I love the fact that he did beat up the NWO. Even more than that, I love the fact that the rest of his team weren't helping him at that point. I thought that was a fantastic touch. The doubts were still there even then. Coupled with that was the fact that he didn't hang around. You know, it was almost as if he didn't really care about the result of this match, leaving just a seed of doubt in our minds that, hey, maybe he'd quite like to see the NWO win this match after all. So I thought that was brilliant. After that, I think we all knew what was going to happen, that the NWO were going to win somehow. Fake Sting causing Luger to submit to a 5 out of 10 Scorpion Deathlock, with Hogan getting involved as well, because Hogan. I suppose we had to get there to try and make the Fake Sting seem worthwhile going forward, because I think we'll be seeing him for a little while longer. It was a bit deflating, but at least as odd as it seems to say, at least it was predictable. So I kind of steeled myself for it. But yeah, as War Games matches go, this one had some really well told story behind it, and that brings it up a couple of notches. But I'd be happy never seeing another War Games match again.
Bryan.
So did Lex Luger actually tap out the end? Because it seemed like the ref just called for the end of the bout. I couldn't tell.
Yeah. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they might be trying to tell a story here, trying to keep the Nick Patrick thing going, that he called for the bell before Luger had a chance to submit. Maybe. I don't think they quite got that across, but that could be where they were going.
I read that happened on Nitro, but if it did, I missed it. Dell actually wrote the TV review, so I may have read that out. But yeah, it wasn't very explicit, and it wasn't particularly well followed upon. Let's say that.
Yeah, so they kick Luger out of the ring, and he's crawling up to the ramp, crying to Stinger to come back and save them all, but, Sting's long gone at that point. The match itself, it built up the story nicely, and as soon as fake Sting shows up, the crowd doesn't buy it, and it just destroyed the ending, because if the crowd doesn't buy it, they completely lost interest in everything that would happen at that point. So, it was okay. War Games is not one of my favorite War Games matches I've seen at this point, but it was alright for what it was, and it's obviously leading to something bigger, hopefully.
Bryan, is the War Games format something that just works when you've got a ticking 4 horsemen? Because I've seen 4 during this show now. I don't think any of them have been any good.
What was the previous one that we had done together?
That would have been the one last year. That would have been Hogan, Luger, Sting, and Savage against...
the Dungeon of Doom?
Yeah, who would that have been? Taskmaster... let me look it up. You carry on talking, Bryan. I'll find out that card.
Yeah, I do enjoy these matches. I like the fact that it's the biggest stars in the company together in a double-sided steel ring with steel cage with 2 rings. I like the visual aspect of it. But at this point, it was obvious that what they were leading to would be that NWO victory with some kind of shenanigans at the end. The fact that Sting walked out is probably the most interesting thing about the entire thing. I didn't expect that. I just kind of thought he'd show up, save the day, and everyone goes home happy with the Stinger as on top. But it's interesting to see what they're doing at this point.
Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Lex Luger, and Sting defeated Kamala, the Zodiac, the Shark, and Meng.
Oof.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder.
That. Oh, yeah, that. God, that feels like longer than a year ago. Yeah, I mean, where to start with this? I mean, you know, I've done my thing about War Games before. You know, I think the format needs a lot of work. I think it leads to a long period of the match where nothing happens because nothing can happen. It's incredibly formulaic, but I know I'm doing it now. It's incredibly formulaic because you end up with the whole even and then the heels out of advantage, even and the heels out of advantage, etc., etc. That being said, one, there was a lot more drama involved. Two, I really liked the fact that they took all the guys away from ringside and had them come out. I thought it was a big advantage, actually. One, that it built some mystery over who was going to be number 4 on each side. But it also stopped the guys hanging around. It allowed them to focus a little bit more about what happened in the ring. The story was fine. It was maybe okay, you know, in terms of it was a fairly paint by numbers War Games match. You know, I think in another world, you probably would have had Hogan and Flair being number 4 on each side, but obviously they had their reasons for doing that. And then the Stings arrive. And let's have a look at this. I mean, you know, they had the third, you know, you look at the angle on TV and we'll discuss it in a bit about, you know, once the rating came in, should they have just had second thoughts? And maybe they should have done. But they had this angle in mind and they thought we're going to do it. So Fake Stings comes out, and that's fair enough. Team NWO or Team NWO, that was their number 4 guy. One, I don't think it looks good on anyone, let alone Sting, that Jeff Farmer, aka Cobra, can do a very, very convincing Sting impression, in that the idea about Sting is that he's really, really good, and Jeff Farmer can do the splashes probably just as well as he can, and he can do the Scorpion Deathlock probably just as well as he can. He's not the fake Sting, he's just another version of. That happens. But my kind of overriding thought was, well, who was meant to be number 4 for WCW? And I know they said they were going to go in with 3 guys. Maybe. But that kind of felt a bit weak to me. That rationale felt a bit weak to me. So the real Sting comes out and he starts cleaning house. And I guess you can say once you commit to going down the path they went down, this was really good because it was. It was quite a clever way of having Sting come out, do his stuff and then leave. Fair enough. But I guess in that, once we're at that point, fair enough. But Rory, the finish I found incredibly strange. Because one, as I say, in theory, the Scorpion Deathlock is a move that only Sting can use, well, unless he's Bret Hart. Only Sting in WCW can use because it's only a move that he's good enough to pull off. So why was fake Sting able to do it? And if Luger didn't tap out, then what happened? Because the match just ended, and then, you know, and we'll come to the post-match in a minute, but Rory, I guess I can accept what happened up until 4 and 4, and I can even accept what happened when Sting left. But after that, it fell a bit flat, and it was all a bit abrupt.
Yeah, the finish was weird, wasn't it? Like I say, when I was running through, as soon as Sting left, I think we all knew that one way or the other the match was actually going to finish pretty soon after that, because there's nowhere else you could really go from there without ringing the bell and just bringing things to a halt. And yeah, I suppose they kind of gave themselves outcome explanation by having Hogan locking Luger in whatever chin lock made up hold he had him in to try and say that he was he helped make him pass out. But I don't know. I'm probably clutching at straws a bit there. But yes, you're right. In WCW world, the Scorpion Deathlock is Sting's move. Was it painful enough to make Luger even want to? Even if you take out the possible Nick Patrick side we talked about a few minutes ago, Yeah, that one's raised a lot of questions with few answers and not in a good way.
Bryan, input on any of that?
I do believe Shivani did throw out a passing. I believe Luger passed out from the pain. That's the only obvious explanation. So, I mean, there was that, but the whole thing seemed like it was bungled at the end. But I guess it didn't matter because we still had much more to go.
Yeah, that we did. Okay. The brawl goes on up the R-way once the cage is lifted. Savage comes out and goes after Hogan. They get in the second ring, but Savage is on his own. In my notes, I simply got, where did the Horsemen go and where is the rest of the WCW roster? It's a 4-on-1 beatdown, and here comes Liz, because Liz hung around even though nobody else has. Seems like she wants them to stop. She places herself on top of Savage. Hogan takes the spray paint and sprays NWO HH onto the back of Liz's dress. Hogan grabs the mic, says they said they would be together until death do us part, and we're going to make that happen. Does nobody like Randy Savage? ? Giant says he thinks he's Michelangelo. Hogan and Giant still haven't worked out the whether you like it or whether you don't line, as they keep talking over each other. Where did the rest of Team WCW go? Sorry, I just got like a stream of contras in these notes. Where did WCW go anyway? The NWO eventually make their way to the commentary desk. Hogan says this is NWO commentary. DiBiase then started saying, now that we've proven we're the best there is, which, if that was meant to be a really, really subtle tease about Bret Hart, fair fucks, because it was really subtle to the point where I think a lot of people missed it. But I quite like that anyway. Bryan, I think it's pretty obvious what I thought based on the disdain in my notes, but talk me through this.
I think it was funny that Hogan teased actually murdering Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth in the middle of the ring. And, he didn't make good on it. So, that's kind of, I don't want to say disappointing, but I guess it's just, okay, is this where we're going now with the NWO? Shivani said this is the lowest point in WCW history, which maybe he's right on that front.
Well, if you want to go back 12 months, we referenced the War Games match from last year. If you remember, the conclusion at the end of that match was Giant coming out and snapping Hulk Hogan's neck. Now, they're best friends now, which makes fuck all sense. But yeah, like we talk about murder, maybe it's just something about, maybe it's War Games. Maybe people are thinking about death. I don't know. Rory.
That's a jolly thought. Yes, I've just got one question here, Bob. Where were WCW? I mean, just what happened there? I mean, Savage.
Well, where did the Horsemen go? Forget about everyone else. There is at least a theory. The Horsemen in particular. At least the
Horsemen is absolutely.
The everyone else has gone home. There's at least that theory, right? But okay. The brawl starts happening. Now, okay, I can buy the NWO winning the brawl. But unless they, escorted them backstage, shunted them in the room, and locked the door within the space of about 30 seconds, did they just get up and walk off? Because that's kind of what it looked like. Now, okay. There is one thing here, which is, if there's one thing we believe the Horsemen not to like, it is Randy Savage. So I can kind of excuse the Horsemen going away, because Flair and Savage are at loggerheads. Where the fuck was everyone else?
Whatsoever. None at all. Just leaving Savage out there as lamb to the slaughter to be saved by Elizabeth of all people. Elizabeth and Savage, are they actually together in storyline at the moment? I don't think they are they? Has that been played up at all?
Nope. What a hella weird time to have some, your feelings rush back.
Yes, exactly. When he's been beaten up by 5 people. Yes, and that was uncomfortable viewing, but not in the way I think it was intended. It was uncomfortable viewing because it was just a bit of a mess, really. And I think they're out and out just stalling for time. I think when Giovanni said this is the worst thing we've ever seen in the history of WCW, I do wonder if there were, I'm just guessing here, but I do wonder if there were some other plans, original plans for something else to actually happen there. And they got nixed, I don't know, because it wasn't that bad, really. It was a bad watch, but it wasn't that heinous compared to even anything that the NWO have done before. So I do wonder if that was the case. And it did go on too long, and they ended up just sauntering around just to fill PPV time. But so one thing I will say, and I definitely read that DiBiase line as a little jab at Bret Hart.
Yeah, or a hint. Who knows?
Yeah, hint, jab, whatever. Maybe just, hey, if you're watching some. But yes, I absolutely read it as a Bret Hart reference, 100%.
Bret Hart is, I believe, out of contract at the moment. I suspect he's going to stay, given that they basically just set up a program with Steve Austin. But maybe they're talking. Maybe there was a line. I mean, it wasn't overt enough. If they'd have been, well, we proved the best there is, and we know we're the best there was, and then left it at that. Maybe if he'd have done that, but there wasn't quite enough where I think we can read ton into it. But it was a nice little nugget anyway.
That was some excellent execution with the spray paint there, Hogan.
All right. Brian, next month it's Randy Savage versus Hollywood Hogan for the NWO/WCW World Heavyweight title at Halloween Havoc. Did anyone that watched this show think, that's going to be a fun match? Because having seen Randy Savage get the piss beaten out of him twice, and this never helps, finding out that Randy Savage has got no friends, which is never the way to market what is essentially now your number one babyface, that match doesn't seem remotely as appealing as it did a couple of months ago.
I completely agree, and it is a little strange, especially when you consider that you had at least Benoit and Mongo, who are members of the Horsemen, who could have potentially have also shown up at the end, the fight. At least those two could have showed up. But this Miss Elizabeth thing is very strange, since I want to say that 2 weeks ago that she had shown up with Ric Flair, with a woman, Elizabeth, and then the Queen of WCW. Her name is escaping me at this point. Miss McMichael, whatever her name is. So, yeah, there you go. So the fact that Elizabeth is now back with Savage, I don't know how good that's going to help his fight against the NWO, but it is interesting. I will agree that it doesn't seem like Savage has a real leg to stand on coming in at the next pay-per-view.
Yeah, I mean, it's all just very, very strange. I mean, I feel like we're going to discuss more about the NWO later in the show. I feel like there were so many things you could have done here. We'll talk about the Sting thing in a bit. But we talk about trying to make a guy. Why not just have Benoit run out and just go on a tear? Even if he got beaten the fuck up, right? Even if, why not have Benoit run out and try and take on 6 guys and get through 4 of them and then get cut off by the Giant? How could, I'm not saying the NWO were necessarily wrong to, win the segment, or, given the fact they've won the match and they've dominated everything else recently, I think there's a case and there's a question in a second about who should have won this match. But, even if you didn't send out the entire roster, and there's a reluctance to do that because, to an extent they don't want the NWO running off, and I think to an extent they just don't want the NWO to look bad. But why not send out a couple of guys that just, sacrifice themselves? Send out Benoit. Hell, you want to get Jericho over, send him out there. Send out Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio's got a fucking beef with the NWO. Guys that we know are in the building. It's less about the idea that Savage got beaten the fuck up. It's more, where was everyone else? I can live with the NWO walking off at the end. That was a big complaint I had amongst many, as you can probably tell. Brian, who should have won this match, all being well? Because I think we come back to the finish, and if anything, the worst possible combination was the least important guy in the match, e.g. fake Sting, picking up a win over Lex Luger. That seemed incredibly strange to me.
It's the highlight of Cobra's career.
Yeah, I'll give you that. But in the grander scheme of things, if the NWO were going to win, surely give the win to one of the other 3.
Yeah, I do agree on that front. I would have thought WCW was going to win this. Like I said earlier, it would just seem like that's just the easy way to go. Give WCW the win, give WCW the victory here with Sting standing tall. But I'm okay with the NWO winning at this point. If seeing how Sting walked out and basically maybe a tease of him joining the NWO, if that's what they really want to go into, if they're going to go after him now that he's turned his back on WCW, that might be all right.
Rory, same question?
One on the fact that Fake Sting is the least interesting of the 4 people on the NWO team, but I still think he had to be involved in the finish somehow, no matter how convoluted and confusing it was, as we discussed just now.
Can I offer an alternative solution? Or an alternative way? Sorry to cut you off, Roy, but it's just...
Go ahead. Go.
Surely Sting, real Sting's involvement in this match should have been killing off Fake Sting. If he'd have done that and then walked out, and I know it's not, then you've got the NWO with the numbers game, but the NWO have been fucking winning battles where they're behind, let alone level. Forget the fact that they might be in front. But wouldn't it have made more sense? Sting comes out there, beats the piss out of the Fake Sting, buries in between the 2 rings, and then fucks off. Would that not have made a lot more sense?
I like that. I really do like that, because you're getting Fake Sting involved, and you're also getting rid of him, so it's a win-win for me. I really like that idea. As it stands, all I will say is WCW had better start winning something soon, because this is going to get one-sided if it isn't already, in a real hurry, and that's going to start turning people off.
But the final question is, Roy, should they have won tonight? I mean, I look at it, we're in the Carolinas, we're in Flair country, we're in Horseman country, in front of an audience that really, really want to see them win. And the NWO has been on a tear for the last 10, 11 weeks. Was this not a time? As I say, it would have been a bit piss weak if Fake Sting / the 1, 2, 3 kid, if we're going to call him 6 now, whatever, / the weakest guy in the match should have won the match, had have lost the match, and that's how Team WCW would have won. But surely, if ever there was a time, if ever there was a match, if ever there was a place to give WCW some hope, and this comes back to this whole match and this whole angle, this was it. And I just think WCW should have won the match. Whether you do the Sting angle or not, have WCW win the match. Give us some fucking hope.
Okay. You could still do, and in fact it might even have been more of a payoff if they did the after-match Savage beatdown after WCW had won the match. Because at the moment we had WCW, we had the Giant beating Savage, we had WCW winning the War Games match, and we had them destroying Savage and standing tall at the end of the show. No, that's 3-0. That's a whitewash. So, yes, perhaps, because I want to see WCW start winning some bloody matches here. War Games would have been a good place to start. It would have probably been somebody on the WCW team pinning Fake Sting, so it almost would have been a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. But at least it would, thinking out loud here, at least it would have been something. Because if they don't win here, when do they?
Bryan, any more to add to that? I know we've discussed this for quite a while, but you can tell my tail's up about it.
I have really nothing else to add. You guys have covered it all.
Yeah, I think Rory was right. The NWO won this 3-0. And I, as much as I probably had even more problems with the post-match stuff, that was the bit to win. I would have done that differently, but I would have had the NWO standing tall at the end. But I would have had WCW winning the match because you've got to give them something. And then I would have just sacrificed a few guys just in the name of, as I say, we talk about making guys. Say it's just Benoit. Let's pretend everyone else has gone home. The Benoit and fucking Mongo aren't going anywhere fast while their other 2 guys are in the ring, right? Send out Benoit, have him beat up Fake Sting, have him beat up, whoever else is there, have him run through Hall and Nash, they're a bit tired, and then have him get run over by the Giant and get disposed of by everyone else. Have him be the honourable hero that gets downed, in battle. You end up with exactly the same thing, and you make Benoit look like a fucking badass, and I bet the crowd would have gone with that. I bet the crowd at that stage in the game would have really, really gone with that. But I just feel like the NWO angle is so big, they might be able to overcome it. But to me, the NWO angle is so big, pay a bit more attention. just because there's so much going on, and because Raw's so shit that people are going to watch you come what may, just because all that's going on, pay a bit more attention, put a bit more thought into all of this. Right now, and to an extent, we talk about Hulk Hogan's pull over the rest of the decision making. Apparently, interesting tidbit, Hogan wanted to pile driver Elizabeth. They nixed that because they didn't think Turner would take too kindly to the idea, and I think they were right on that one. But this whole NWO angle is going up against the backdrop of Hulk Hogan is calling all the shots, and not only is Hulk Hogan calling all the shots, he's calling a lot of the shots quite late, which means that they're having to rush and come up with incomplete stuff. But it's like, it's my overriding frustration with Hogan. You can be selfish and give a little more up, because the more you give up, the bigger the angle gets. And the bigger the angle gets, the more money you make. So it's like, look, lose the match, have the post-match beatdown, build some heat on yourselves again, because WCW looks stronger, and it means when the rematch comes around, Hogan and Savage is bigger. Don't beat the fuck out of Savage twice in 20 minutes and then wonder why next month people don't buy the show because they don't think there's a challenge. That was my overriding thought. But yes, as you can tell, I had quite a lot to say about this match, and it's still a fucking long time to go in this show. Rory, your overall thoughts on this show and a score rating out of 10?
First 2 hours, not without their flaws, in my opinion, but a really excellent watch. Couldn't really take your eyes off it for a second. Some absolutely terrific action. Everybody going out there, giving it their all, in my opinion. And I certainly recommend everybody watching the first 2 hours of this show if you can. After that, let's say in-ring wise, it does get a bit patchy, but there's still a lot going on and a lot to take in, and indeed a lot to discuss with your friends about as we prepare for the last 20 minutes, just talking about the main event. So, a pay-per-view that has a lot of excellent in-ring action on the undercard, followed by big storylines, possibly laying groundwork for future big storylines to be paid off and or extended in the future, and a lot of major talking points, then you've got a really excellent pay-per-view. Now, I gave Bash at the Beach 8 out of 10, which I thought, perhaps looking back now, I might have slighted that a little bit. So whilst this one was not a perfect show, because the last hour from an in-ring perspective was a bit of a letdown, for me, this was the best WCW pay-per-view I've seen this year. So I'm going, despite its flaws, it's almost an absolute must-watch. I'm going a high 8.5 out of 10.
Interesting. Brian?
8.5 out of 10. I'll give it a solid 8 out of 10 on my side of things. I enjoyed this pay-per-view immensely. There were a handful of low points throughout the entirety of the show. The one match in particular, I guess, would be the Ice Train versus Scott Norton match. That didn't really go anywhere for me. But overall, there wasn't really any kind of dull moments. There weren't any kind of major points that I just felt completely bored with the action inside the ring. And I think I'd agree with Rory again here that this was the best pay-per-view I've seen out of WCW in a while. So 8 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, I would say the Great American Bash was fractionally better. I mean, I'm more of an angles guy than I'm a match guy. And the one slight negative about the first 2 hours of the show, but a lot of it was really good action, didn't really mean anything. One thing they really got right about the Great American Bash was they tried, I think, 3 angles and they pulled them all off. But as I say, as a wrestling show, the first 2 hours of this are pretty much flawless, pretty much. The criticism more is that what does it matter? And then we get the main events, which, as we've discussed for about the last half an hour, if not a bit more, there's a lot going on. Some good, a lot bad. I gave the show 7.5 out of 10 in that there were just too many potholes towards the end. Too many things just really make you scratch your head. And for all the talk of, for all you might say, Bob, what about the really good wrestling that comes up front? I'd kind of forgotten it all come the end of the show. Like, I'm kind of sat here now going, in the grander scheme of things, what mattered at the end of the show? And it was everything after the tag match was what mattered. And everything that mattered had massive holes in it. Massive holes. And massive things that you're just going, what the hell have you done there? And that's, it's like, I don't know what it's like, but it's like a really good movie where the ending doesn't make any sense. You're like, well, the story was quite good, but this is how you finished it. And how you finished it in many ways is the most important part. And I didn't think they finished it very well. But still, 7.5 out of 10. And as Rory says, this is a must-watch show. There are some shows where you're like, 7.5 out of 10 is good, skip it. Don't skip this one. Watch it. You'll get some good action with enough talking points. And then the main event with a lot of talking points. We open up Nitro on September the 16th with Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko running down the happenings from last night's War Games, with Tony giving a personal apology to Sting. Coming tonight, we have the Nitro debut of Glacier, and we start with a Cruiserweight title match, Mysterio retaining with a mental reversal off the top rope powerbomb into a Hurricane Rana. Outside, the NWO gang gets bigger as dozens of young guys clad in black and white pass out flyers. Benoit and McMichael call out Luger after last night's Sting antics. We hear from Glacier for the first time, talking about his heritage. Dallas Page takes on Ice Train, and we magically miss the entire finish due to a jump cut to an Outlaw NWO merch stand being set up, although the finish was actually horrendous, where the ref, Page and Ice Train got into it by the ring ropes, and Page jumped and grabbed the towel off of Teddy Long, who was also on the apron, threw it over Patrick's head, who called for the DQ, thinking that Long had thrown the towel in. In the crowd, we see the 1-2-3 Kid in a Doors t-shirt. Tony and Larry speculate and mention the WWF by name. Kona retains the AAA title against Super Callow, and we then hear from the Kid. Brad Armstrong gets a win over Hugh Morris as we lead into hour number 2. We hear from the Macho Man talking about his shot against Hogan's title next month at Halloween Havoc. Out back, the NWO celebrate their win with the B Sting. Thanks for that, Del. Flash Norton gets a wing over Savage as the weak chair shots do give a DQ in this one. Big Bubba gets his Karate Kid puns in before his match with Glacier. Glacier's entrance actually comes with indoor snow. The commentators try to make him sound like a big deal. Annoyingly, the lights stay dimmed in blue for the entire match. Bischoff is loving the kick calls. Glacier gets a win with a standing sidekick. That was that then. Sting comes out to talk about WCW, turning his back on him whilst having his back to the hard camera. He says he'll stand by those who believe in him, but the doubters can stick it. He now believes himself to be a free agent. Jericho and Bagwell team up to do their best Wham impression. Anderson and Flair have a stalled entrance, leaving a scared Liz backstage. Ringside, the 1-2-3 Kid pushes a novelty remote button and NWO flyers fall from the rafters. Seriously, there were loads of them. Jericho puts in a shift to cover for Bagwell. Out back, the NWO welcome Kid on board as they showed last week. Sting voice was a recording. Boom rakes Bagwell's eyes behind Nick Patrick's back. Ric Flair gets the win with the figure 4. Luger comes out alone to face Benoit and McMichael in the main event. Lex gets heavily worked over, manages to get Benoit in the torch rack before Flair and Anderson run out to make it 4-on-1. Outside, the NWO recruit their own cameraman, but Kid is rebranded as 6. And next week they say everyone in WCW is going to Japan, so why don't we take over?
I want a chance to explain something that happened last Monday night at Nitro. Last Monday night, I was on an airplane flying from LA to Atlanta. When I got to Atlanta, I tuned in the TV to Nitro. And I thought I was watching a rerun. It was a very convincing film.
Why won't he look at the camera?
Often imitated, but never duplicated, though. And what else did I see? I saw people, I saw wrestlers, I saw commentators, and I saw best friends doubt the Stinger. That's right. Doubted the Stinger.
It's like a little
I heard Lex
here.
Luger
We
say,
turned our backs on him,
I
and
know
I guess
where
he's
he
doing it to
lives,
us.
I know where he works out, I'm gonna go get it. So I said to myself, I'll just go into seclusion. I'll wait and see what happens on Saturday night. And I tuned in Saturday night, and what did I see? I saw more of the same, more doubt. Which brings me to Fall Brawl. I knew I had to get to Fall Brawl
to get face to face with the total package to let him know that it wasn't me. And what I got out of that was, no, Sting, I don't believe you, Sting. Well, all I gotta say is, I have been mediator, I have been babysitter for Lex Luger. I've given him the benefit of the doubt about 1,000 times in the last 12 months. Yeah.
What's he getting to? I don't like the,
and
I don't like the tone of this at all.
I've carried the WCW banner. And I have given my blood, my sweat, and my tears for WCW.
I don't like where this is going.
So for all of those fans out there and all those wrestlers and people that never doubted the Stinger, I'll stand by you if you stand by me. But for all of the people, all of the commentators, all of the wrestlers, and all of the best friends who did doubt me, you can stick it. From now on, I consider myself a free agent. But that doesn't mean that you won't see the Stinger from time to time. I'm going to pop in when you least expect it.
And we come out of the first TV report. We're going to split each one here because there's different bits of discussion from each one. I think we can finally properly discuss the Sting angle because it was difficult. I didn't want to discuss the first bit because it didn't really make sense without the context of the pay-per-view. But the 16th of Nitro, 16th September Nitro is the last show that we see Sting on for the month. And we get that promo, where Sting is stood basically with his back, opposite the hard camera, or back facing the hard camera, facing the opposite way. So they kind of half shoot it from there and then half shoot it from the side so you can see Sting talking to the fans, which I quite liked. And Sting, amongst other things, and basically when I talk about how kind of uneven this angle was that the story they were going with was that Sting was in Japan, but they didn't seem to tell Sting that. So the version of events that Sting portrayed on Nitro was that, well, I flew it to Atlanta that evening, I watched on TV, and I thought, you know what? Luger said that he knows where I hang out. I'm going to lay low for a while and see what happens. That was a bit weak. But we get to the end and Sting says, for those who stuck by me, I'm with you all the way. But if you had doubts, like my best friend, then you can stick it. Rory, this is really interesting because much like the Giant turning, or somewhat like the Giant turning, it's quite an interesting angle, yet I feel it's at the detriment of their babyface roster and of the character involved.
Very well put. By the sounds of it, it looks as though Sting said, was it will turn up when you least expect it? I mean, that could mean anything, and it might mean he's gone for a very long time. And if so, then the babyface roster looks incredibly weak, and they can't afford that to happen at this point. So I hope they've got themselves some sort of out on this one coming up fairly soon. I mean, he didn't appear, as I said in the news, he didn't appear again for the rest of the month. But, so we need to get their story straight on that one, as they didn't really deal with why Sting was not in Japan last week, the week of the pay-per-view, and when he tried to describe probably where he'd been for the last 7 days, that's something they just about managed to sort out. But I thought the promo itself was actually really good. I think Sting has done some really good promo work in the last few months. His impersonation of a shark at the expense of Ric Flair 2 years ago at Clash of the Champions seems a very long time ago now, thank goodness. And he's doing some excellent work on the mic, so it's actually a bit of a shame to see him go. He did his best with a rather muddled storyline. I thought his ending line was great.
Impersonation of a shark at the expense of Ric Flair?
Can you not remember that? Clash of the Champions in June 1994, the unification title match when Sherry eventually turned and sided with Flair. I can't remember. I mean, it's playing out clear in my head now, unfortunately. Sting did a promo towards the start of the, I think it was after the first match. It was the situation where if you remember, on main events, they'd accidentally showed the wrong tape. So they announced Flair as world champion before he actually won it.
Yeah.
Came out there to try to cover for that. So, I suppose what his promo he did this month, he's got the experience here, and trying to cover up for WCW's snafus. So
I thought you were about John Tenter.
No, not the Shark. Come on now. And Sting called himself, "I'm a great white shark," and I'm impersonated a shark basically, and. So yes, there you go. Check out the tape if you can, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry to cut you off mid-flow there, Rory. I just had a complete blank. But yeah, that's coming back to me now. They ended up showing the control center that was taped for after the Clash, before the Clash, and so Sting had to pretend that it was mind games by Flair. That they'd put a control center in that already said Flair had won, despite the fact that the control center had already predicted all the other results correctly, but needs must sometimes. Bryan, before I cut Rory off, thoughts on the Sting stuff?
I like Sting, and he had a good promo here, but there's a bit of a passive aggressiveness, bitchiness coming from Sting where, Lex Luger says some bad things about me, and he doesn't trust me, he doubts me. Yet I walked away for a week and just didn't contact him at all throughout this entire time. That explanation is super weak. You would figure if there's some kind of disagreement or some kind of thing where you upset your quote-unquote best friend, you would immediately find a way to step in and fix things. But for him, he decided to walk away for 7 days and just show up at the pay-per-view to let him know on camera, hey, that wasn't me, man. I don't know why you're saying this about me. And to hold such a grudge against him, it just seems a bit odd coming from Sting.
Yeah, when I talk about at the end of the pay-per-view about important storylines and making them really watertight, this is a really, really important storyline. And that explanation was piss weak. The idea that he was in Japan wasn't a great storyline, but it at least excused it because the whole point was, why didn't Sting contact Luger at any point? Well, I know he said, I looked at that and I went, maybe I'm going to lie low for a week. And I kind of went, why would Sting do that? Why would good guy babyface Sting see the NWO, this big evil group, impersonating him and putting his best friend in a position where his best friend might think that he's turned his back on him? Why would Sting's first reaction be, I know, I'm going to let Luger believe it? And that's the big thing. We can come back to the angle now. We talk about the angle, and the angle was quite well done. They took DiBiase to the limo. They had DiBiase open the limo door, but we didn't see inside. And then they played some kind of hacked-together Sting promos that made it sound like Sting was speaking. I watched that and, knowing that it wasn't the real Sting, kind of went, I can tell this is fake. But it's quite a convincing angle. And then Luger arrives. It's pissing it down with Bryan. It's a fair play to Luger in wrestling gear, getting beaten the piss out of while it's hammering it down. Sting steps out the thing. They have a quick stare off, which was quite important to the story of Sting and Luger being able to, look each other in the eyes, or fake Sting. And then the attack happens, etc., etc. Why would Sting watch that and go, and they had the promo later on where Luger says, I know where Sting hangs out, I'll go and find him. Bryan, any input on that?
I completely agree. It just seems to be something completely out of character for the Stinger.
Any more?
No.
No, fair enough. No, I think that's just that's a big gaping hole in this entire thing at the moment. Is that as effective as all this was, it's just a real big question mark. We appear to have lost Rory. We'll just have to carry on. Rory, just keep chiming in and we'll see if we can hear you. But Bryan, I guess the other big question is what did you think of the actual idea of turning Sting? What did you think of that kind of thought process? Because I look at it all and I go, okay, they're not in turning Sting. They're not turned informally, but giving him this edge. Because I look at that angle, an input on the angle if you wish. And then you read the reports coming out of the Observer, and 700,000 homes turned out within 15 minutes of that angle concluding. Bryan, if you're WCW, does that not go, hello, maybe we need to change up?
It definitely would. I don't know how I actually feel about the idea of Sting turning into another NWOite, another Hogan follower. He is the constant in WCW. Him and Flair are icons for World Championship Wrestling. For an NWO to get him, it would be a major, massive get, but then you would risk everything falling apart for WCW because the NWO would be too stacked at that point. Sting himself, I'm actually a bit surprised that the NWO didn't show up at all during this promo. They didn't just try to recruit him right then and there. And I don't know if that's what they're leading to. It doesn't seem like that's where they're going to go.
No, I think if they were going to put Sting with the NWO, they would have just put him with the NWO. I think the idea, by the looks of things, is that they're going to have his character change a little bit. And that he's going to be a bit more of a lone wolf, which isn't necessarily the worst idea. I just feel like, okay, do that, but do that when you've got about 4 or 5 other baby faces that can be more traditional baby faces. I don't know that I'd be getting all of that, creative, quote unquote, with Sting when I don't have many other baby faces. But I thought the angle before the pay-per-view was good. I'm good, good as in like a movie that I can admire, even if I don't, think it was a particularly great story. I just feel once those numbers came in, they should have gone, maybe let's just reverse this, because it would have been fine as a 1-week angle. Sting's not there, say he's in Japan, and then we get to the thing at the weekend and just say, look, that's what happened. But yeah, that was about it. Right, I think we have Rory back with us. Rory, you heard all of that, even though you were for a while unable to speak to us. Chip in about anything we discussed regarding Sting.
I was saying that as good as the promo was, yes, it was a right old mismatch with the storyline, and the one they settled on was indeed pretty weak. I really did like the scene for when we got to see the fake Sting with the rain coming down. I thought that was just a great stroke of luck, and they went with it. I felt like they should have had shot it in black and white with Cavalier Rusticana playing in the background or something. But I thought that was really, really good, and that really added to the vibe. Although Luger still should have known that wasn't the real Sting, but never mind. But yes, as I was saying earlier, it might work in the context of a story they're trying to tell with this slighted, annoyed, semi-tweener Sting who's going to just sod off for a while and come back when he feels like it. But they can't afford to drop their numbers down too much, and I don't think they can afford to have him be gone for long, even if it means they have to tweak the story a bit.
Yeah, I mean, an edgier Sting isn't necessarily the worst idea. We've had, as Anderson said in one of his promos, we've had Sting as this white meat babyface for as long as anyone can remember. And ever since Hulk Hogan's been there, he's kind of hit this ceiling. Now, we say all that, if anything, you would figure the 2 to 3 months following Hulk Hogan shifting away from the number one babyface spot would be the time just to go full steam ahead with a full-on babyface Sting. Sting with a bit more of an edge, long-term, may be an improvement. In that if he's a bit more of a character that's, doesn't accept any shit, I feel like that's going to be the character that wins over the NWO. I don't feel the second coming of Hulk Hogan's going to beat the NWO. You kind of got to beat them at their own game to an extent. It just seems a bit of a risk at a time where you've already turned the Giant, who was a heel but could have been a big babyface, to compromise another one of your big babyfaces, because the drop-off behind, say, Luger, Flair, Savage, and to an extent Arn Anderson, and 2 of those guys have just turned. The drop-off from those guys to what follows is pretty steep. And if you're going to make the NWO bigger and bigger, you're going to need bodies to oppose them that fans care about.
Yep.
And I don't think they've got that right now. And that's why I'd question it. And yeah, as I say, the logic behind him seeing it on TV and doing fuck all about it is really weak. And if you're going to change direction with a character like Sting, I don't think they're going to turn him heel.
No.
I don't really think it makes any sense. I mean, it really makes sense that the NWO just start getting over his baby faces. But if you're going to do what they did, you've got to be so good. And they're just not. That's not a great story. It's, watched on TV, I thought I'd make him sweat on it for a week. I went there, confronted him, Luger didn't believe me, and then we got all the stuff. We got the pay-per-view. Anyway, back Glacier, shall we? Bryan, in the pay-per-view, we spoke at quite a lot of depth about a lot of guys on the show that were quite good, that had no depth and had no backstory. These Glacier promos have been going for fucking months. Like, early April was when I think they first started teasing these. And he finally debuted, and guess what? The crowd reacted. And I've seen Glacier twice now, and I think he's really good. Not in the sense that he's a really great wrestler, but Bryan, I don't know about you, but I really like this character in this debut.
He's definitely different. He stands out completely when compared to everyone else on the roster. And it was very weird to hear, was it Big Bubba call him out in the middle of his promo? I didn't realize that's what they were going to go towards, but sure enough, Big Bubba Rogers versus Glacier, of all people, of all things that happened, his kung fu mastery, I guess you could say, was pretty impressive. It's a strange character, and he's something out of they're not really talking too much about it, but it's something based out of a Mortal Kombat video game, which is, I guess it's fine. I don't know if you could really knock that. I guess that's kind of cool.
What do you think of the entrance?
Well, that is what the character, that's what makes the character. It's this long, overblown entrance where you got the glitter, the fake snow coming out to the ring. You got him doing his kung fu gymnastics. It is amazing.
Rory.
It was amazing. I say we've been having mini Glacier He's Coming promos for months now, 3 months, possibly even longer than that.
Well, the first one was early April, I think. I think we saw more about the character, I think, kind of end of May, early June, which was when I think they were going to debut him, and then things happened, and it's been ages. Bryan, the reason he faced Bubba was that Bubba got on the mic and said, "Where the hell is this guy?" And I kind of went, "Well, yeah, he's right." Sorry, Rory.
Very fair question, actually. And you know what? All this waiting, and it paid off, because we were getting clips and getting slightly longer clips. We still weren't really absolutely sure what we were going to get, but what we got was great. We got a guy who is already clearly so into this character. He had it. What was we were discovering almost along with him in a way what the character was, but he was there. He absolutely got it, and just the little things, the match being bathed in a blue light glow. Is it a little bit silly? I suppose it is, but hey, it fits the character, and character is so important in North
and it's memorable.
Yeah, exactly.
To jump ahead of myself, the Nitro on the 30th, 29th. It's an incredibly boring show because it's just match. They intersperse some pre-NWO segments which the people in the building didn't see, which is a bit weak because they don't have a video wall yet. They are looking at buying one, but that won't be for a few months. In amongst a load of matches that are incredibly forgettable, I talk about the Heat and the Nasty Boys not being the quote-unquote best wrestling match. But I remembered the Heat and the Nasty Boys a lot more than I'm going to remember some of the other matches in that undercard. And if I'm watching Nitro, I'm going to remember this Glacier match far more than I'm going to remember, Mike Enos and Chris Jericho. And it helps with the mood lighting, but I don't think he's going to be a main event actor or anything like that. But, and look, please don't take this seriously in the way you might think. Undertaker, for a long-ass time, has just been an entrance.
Yep.
Undertaker proves you can be popular just off a really fucking cool entrance. This could be that. You know, we talk about Mortal Kombat, something that's quite contemporary. It could work. I think, you know, one thing I really loved was that, you know, he was doing the Mortal Kombat stuff, so it was very kind of stop-start, and he was very much kind of bobbing and weaving, you know, people kind of diving at him, which was really quite cool as well. If they can get the right opponents for him, he could get over quite quickly. He may not, but, you know, if we're going to talk about just a weekly segment on Nitro, Glacier comes out, pops the crowd, and he just wins a squash match in 3 minutes, does some cool kung fu stuff, and then buggers off. I think it'll work.
Go with it. Just if you've got something like that, like I said earlier, go with it. The crowd were into it, and again, if you capture lightning in a bottle, do everything you can to keep it there. They could have. I say he's not going to be main eventing pay-per-views, of course not. I think we already all know that. But go with what you've got. Fantastic.
Schiavone starts the September 23rd Nitro by announcing the WCW Tour of Japan, meaning most of the roster being overseas, and then shows a newspaper ad bought by the NWO. Zbyszko calls them parasites and builds to the presence of Macho Man. First up, Conan the Taskmaster take on Brad Armstrong and Hoovy. Sullivan pulling off the tag for the last minute to steal the win. The Dungeon then turn on Conan and do a beatdown post-match. Jimmy Hart then says it's an initiation before Conan says to the camera he's Dungeon of Doom. Macho cuts a quick promo saying him getting battered by the NWO isn't cut in stone. Jericho gets a solid win over Mike Enos. Pat Tanaka comes out to some pretty cool ring music to take on Glacier. The martial art expert wins, which, well, apparently in this case is Glacier. Schiavone announced as Glacier extended his winning string. Yes, Tony, we love some stringy bacon. The Public Enemy take on Harlem Heat. Booker misses the hangover and Rocco gets the small package. Sloppy ending where they try to do a reversal on the package and Booker clearly pins Rocco Rock, but the Enemy are announced as the new tag team champions. Johnny and Rocco celebrating the crowd to end hour number 1. Starting with a bang, Greg Valentine kicks off the second hour. Macho gets disqualified for using the chair and the Hammer gets the win. The NWO charge to take out Savage and we see a distraught Liz in the entranceway. Giant comes out in the largest waistcoat I've ever seen to introduce Hollywood Hogan. After taking a big leg, Savage gets whipped with Slim Jims. Hogan then spray paints Nacho Man's bald spots. They then take over the commentary desk and bring out their new head of security, Vince. You may remember him as Virgil. Back from commercial, the Outsiders still have the desk with a petrified Bischoff. They then bring out their own branded NASCAR racing car. Jumping Jim Powers takes on Wall Street. Scott Hall saying how good Powers looks, almost juiced. Giants on ring announcing duty. Hogan trawls backstage, tagging the wall, singing "Hooray for Hollywood" while the Outsiders beat down the Powers. Next, Big Ron Studd gets jumped in the aisle and Six gets drafted to face in Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Giant takes down Duggan on the outside to get the win for Six. NWO bring out their own jobber, Bo Ladue, to face NWO Sting. B Sting, that's Dell, gets the win with a Scorpion Deathlock. Outside, the Outsiders beat High Voltage in the main event. We see highlights from the last hour and that closes out our first ever NWO Monday Nitro.
There you are. Am I a marked man? Is that what you're thinking? Well, let me tell you something, Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Whatever it takes, if you're gonna cheap shot me every night and every day before we get to Halloween Havoc, that's not going to change anything because I'm going to take you down because I'm the last hope for the WCW. Otherwise, the entire wrestling world is going to be turned upside down. You're threatening to make that happen. And another thing, let's get the record straight right now. The whole WCW, the majority of them were booked in Japan. And I was booked in Japan too. But I took myself out of there. Not because I've got any unbelievably stroke or anything. I just felt that I needed to be at Nitro. Because it's not cut in stone whether you're going to beat me up or I'm going to beat up the whole NWO tonight. And about Elizabeth, let me tell you something. Not this lifetime, not the next lifetime, or maybe the only thing we got in common is that about 100,000 lifetimes away from now, we might be the same goldfish, swimming in the same water. Now, nothing makes sense, but I'm going to tell you something that does. Halloween Havoc is very scary, and I'm not scared. And Hollywood Hulk Hogan, I take this responsibility to wipe you out. Understand that?
So we come on to the September the 22nd Nitro. Noteworthy most of all was an interesting match in Bamber we just heard. But noteworthy most of all for the second hour that was basically turned into quote-unquote NWO Monday Nitro, with the majority of the WCW roster being out in Japan. They decided just to have NWO take over. And it's basically, I kind of advise you watch it. I'm not necessarily saying it's brilliant, but better me tell you watch it than describe it. But basically, they all rocked up at the building just before 9 o'clock because, of course, we're all about to start. And this was the night of the big reveal of a fake Razor Ramon on the other channel. And then they kind of ambush the commentary desk. They hold Bischoff hostage with Vincent, aka Virgil, as their chief of security. Although I must admit, the idea of Eric Bischoff not being able to take Virgil did take me back a bit, but I guess it makes sense. And then we basically had them take over the show. There were no name guys on the show really at all. We had the Giant ring announcing. I've got something to say about that in a bit. And basically, the NWO for second hour just took over the show. They were on commentary all the time. DiBiase went back to what usually on Raw, a bit of colour commentary. And the guys kind of got involved. And Bryan, I got to the end of that hour and went, okay, we tried it. It was quite funny. Giant had a bit of fun. Kevin Nash had a bit of fun. But let's never do this again.
It was a bit of an abysmal hour of professional wrestling. It seemed completely out of place, but yeah, it was a neat experiment. The matches you had, we saw the debut of Six against, who did he fight against? He got destroyed by Hacksaw Jim Duggan, which is weird. The fact that they had Jim Duggan pretty much destroy Six, and the Giant is the one who pretty much saved them, and the NWO ref counted the win for Six. Neat experiment. I don't want this to be a weekly occurrence.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, Saturday night, and admittedly Saturday night's not Nitro, but a few people are watching it and we're not. But this kind of, we'll discuss this more. This kind of wraps into everything else, which is just kind of the thought that the NWO works when they're the outsiders. When it's, when there's literally no hope. And in the third hour, there was no hope. There was no WCW, once they've beaten Savage up, there was no hope for anybody. Anyone watching the WCW were going to have an answer. Once you've lost hope, Rory, as a viewer, there's just nothing left.
This is it. It's, it almost felt like a bit of a novelty. It felt like they hadn't written much for the show, so we might as well give this an opportunity to have the NWO do stuff for an hour. And I enjoyed it on very few levels, actually. Just went on too long. I didn't like the thing of them holding Bischoff semi-captive. I didn't want to see Virgil, Vincent, whatever you call him, anywhere near my TV screen ever again as well. And it was a very, very long hour. And
it was, wasn't it? It was about 45 minutes if you take out the commercials. The ring action was non-existent.
There's nothing there at all in ring. I mean, at least when Ted DiBiase pretending to put over Jim Powers on commentary is one of the most memorable parts of an hour, you've got problems. But it was just too repetitive. I mean, the Giant doing the ring announcing, yes, it was amusing the first time. It was pretty annoying the 57th time. And it didn't work. And again, just made it look NWO. And if they are having this idea of an hour worth of equivalent Saturday night or something like that, then I hope that they reconsider. I think even just tucking it away on Saturday night won't really help them. It's just making it look all things NWO all the time. And even though the whole point of the NWO is in trying to form their own organisation out of WCW, they just cannot push it too far at this stage. If they keep doing that, they're going to end up killing it. and that'll be a
that's
mistake.
the whole point. Who do they face? Like, in an NWO, we talk about the whole point of the NWO ultimately forming their organisation. Well, that might be the whole point. They can't do it. The idea is they're meant to threaten it, and then when they get to the point where they're just about to do it, they get cut off by the heroic WCW babyfaces, because you can't have a show like this. This just wouldn't work. They've got to have people to fight, and they've got to have credible threats.
Yes.
And I given the scenario they were in, given what happened, given that most of the guys were in Japan, I don't necessarily disagree with what they did, or even how they did it. I don't necessarily think it was an ineffective hour. As I kind of said with Bryan a second ago, it was, an interesting experiment. We've seen it. We've looked at the ratings flattened out, and they weren't turning into Raw, they just turned off. And it was like, okay, I get it now, we've seen it, guys got to have their time, etc., etc. And then we got to the end, it was like, right, let's don't do this again. That was my overriding thought, it was an experiment, it made sense given the scenario they were in, but let's not go back there. Bryan, any more thoughts? I mean, was there, Rory mentioned Jim Powers, was there any redeeming features in Scott? One thing I think Scott Hall's might be the MVP of this year, given that, we talk about a cool group, he's really the only cool guy in it. Was there any redeeming features from this? Was it at least entertaining from our perspective?
Here and there, they had their moments. I mean, for God's sake, there was a Virgil chant that started up. How cool is that?
Well, yeah, there is that. The other thing I'll bring up now, it kind of will happen on the 16th, actually, as well. But we talk about the expansion of the NWO, we'll discuss that more from a personnel perspective in the next bit. But the introduction around the arena of multiple people in NWO gear, flogging NWO stuff. Bryan, I quite like it because they need a rational excuse as to why people are able to get NWO merchandise so quickly. But does go back 3 months, does the whole thing not feel really watered down at the moment?
I do agree, especially if they keep adding 1 or 2 people every week, since at this point it's completely blown up. But there also could be a possibility they could be leading towards, like what you said earlier, an NWO promotion. I guess you would need bodies within the NWO promotion. So with Hogan talking up to the Nasty Boys during that promo of his, maybe there are plans of just completely eradicating WCW and just running as their own independent promotion, which is super weird, but I don't know. That looks like that's what they want to do.
What do you think about the expansion of the group, Bryan? I mean, we're looking at the list of members now being Hogan, Hall, Nash, Giant, DiBiase, Six, Fake Sting, the Nasty Boys, Kyle Petty, Virgil as Vince. I may be forgetting someone, I may not be. There's about 9 or 10 people now. I'm not expecting Kyle Petty to be around every week. But it feels, it was always going to be difficult to expand because you couldn't keep bringing out a guy the level of Diesel, Razor, Ramon. But it feels a bit like a letdown now. Like every new guy you add just feels like, it's a bit less special. Scott Hall's cool. Diesel, Kevin Nash is kind of cool. Six is a bit of a dweeb. Fake Sting, I mean, like, we talk about Fake Sting, I haven't written about Fake Sting at the pay-per-view. Fake Sting has served its purpose now, right? Even if whatever happens to the real Sting, the fake one's pointless. And then we have the Nasty Boys, which feels a bit weird. It didn't quite work for me. What do you think, Bryan?
There is a feeling of the NWO completely becoming bloated at this point. But I would assume that there's a reasoning behind this. I would assume that they actually are looking to, I guess, get an entire roster together where you have guys on top, then you got guys who can, I really don't know, to be honest, now that I'm thinking about it. The inclusion of the Nasty Boys and the takeover of NASCAR racing, that seems to be a bit much to what the original idea of the NWO were, I guess, just to take over the world of professional wrestling, but they they're looking like they're trying to take over the entire world, and there's no one that can stop them. If Sting's not around, who do you have? You got Savage, you got the Horsemen, and the Dungeon of Doom to take on the NWO. That's kind of sad.
It goes back to, it's sort of the other side of the coin from what I brought up earlier, that you can't overload it with too many absolute superstars too early. But then if you're going to keep making it look like the NWO are another cyclical project, then you're going to need to add some people to them. So you're going to need to bring in some, let's say, lower card people to be charitable, whether they are Virgil or the Nasty Boys or whoever. I just wonder now they're bringing in, again, and admittedly only temporarily, I hope, a NASCAR driver. Where is this going to stop now? Are they going to just sweep up the entire mid-card? Are we going to see Hogan, because he sees himself as a bit of a celebrity out there in that real world? Are we going to see more, BC listers joining the ranks whenever WCW pulls into their town for a week? It could, and it hasn't got there yet, but it could end up getting a little bit silly, and that is absolutely not what this whole point of the NWO thing is, because I'm still very much a believer in what the NWO angle is trying to do, and it's still I believe it's still very early days. I don't think we're going to see the end game for quite a while, whatever that ends up being. So there's still time to pull back. It's by not even close to failing yet, but again, they've got to tread carefully, and they've got to rein in certain people who may or may not have a hefty dose of creative control in this sort of thing.
Rory, why do they need extra members?
That's actually
because you watch the first Nitro of the month. As much as Giant came out and kind of surprised people by turning, they didn't need him. But originally the initial plan was that Giant was going to come out and save the day for the NWO, who were getting beaten down by the Four Horsemen and the Dungeon of Doom. Of course, Hogan got involved. The theory they presented was that you guys have just been wrestling for a while, you won't be as fresh. 3 on 8 lads, that doesn't really work. Viewers aren't thinking conditioning when they're watching this kind of angle, right? And then, if Giant comes out, so you've got a fourth guy. Why do you need extra guys if every step you win? Surely the idea should be that every time, we'll talk about this when we come to the following show, but every time the threat from WCW becomes stronger, that's when the NWO needs to react by adding more guys. What are they adding more guys for at the moment? Why do they need Virgil as Vince as chief of security just to cover Eric Bischoff when they've got 3 guys that contribute already?
It's very true. They've only going 2 months and they win all the bloody time as it is anyway. I mean, it's not as if they have anything to really shore up. And this is what I mean. They can't let it drift away from its moorings at this stage. And I have my worries that that's already where we're starting to head, and it's starting to become, I'm going to say, an ego trip for certain people. That from a kayfabe and non-kayfabe perspective, but almost we can have these people on our side and we're going to do it. Why? Because, why the hell not? Because we can. And again, that should not be the point. And I think you put it absolutely perfectly there, Bob. NWO should strengthen when they think that WCW is strengthening against them, not just for the hell of it by bringing in people just for sheer weight of numbers. They need to nip it in the bud quickly, in my opinion, but and I hope I'm wrong, but I can only see it going in the opposite direction and more people just joining up, which is going to end up diluting it a lot, which would be a real shame because they've really got something special here. Don't ruin it, please.
Brian, same question.
I completely agree with what Rory said. There is a complete feeling of just a confusion, I guess, within the NWO ranks. You've got these guys who are coming in, like you said, a Virgil. Why would you bring in this guy to be the head of security whenever you've got other guys that can easily take over Eric Bischoff? And to have a guy, the CEO of the NWO security, who isn't as menacing as the Giant or isn't menacing as pretty much anyone else in the NWO right now, So, yeah, a lot of that's confusing. A lot of it's just kind of head-scratching. But I don't know what their plans are. I don't know what they're trying to get done with this mass introduction of all these new characters into the NWO. I'm not looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in the next month and see who else joins them, if they actually get other people from the World Wrestling Federation or if they look to other people within WCW to join. It looks like it's just going downhill at this point.
Well, at the rate of the expansion, they started the month at 4, they ended the month at 10, so they grew by 2.5 times. So at the end of next month, they should be at 25 guys. I think at that stage, it definitely would have jumped the shark. Tony Schiavone introduced us to Eric Bischoff on September 30th Nitro with an excellently delivered promo to the live camera, talking about the history of World Championship Wrestling and what a mistake it was to sign Hulk Hogan. El Technico and Juventud Guerrera go up against the new tag champs, the Public Enemy, to start. Tony tells us they'll be defending against the Outsiders at Halloween Havoc. Funnily enough, Johnny and Rocco get the win here. Technico gets the tabletop, gets on the table and gets put through it to top it off. The NWO aired another paid-for promo, this time from their Marriott Hotel suite. Next, Steve Malenko takes on Alex Wright, Malenko carrying Rey Mysterio Jr.'s mask, which he took on this week's Saturday night. Wright ducks a top rope crossbody and rolls up Malenko for the win. Randy Savage plugs Slim Jim's competition to win a monster truck in a commercial. Anything to keep them off of WCW's pay-per-view. More of the NWO army go through the card with picket signs as Eddie Guerrero seems to beat Jim Powers in another sus call by Nick Patrick. Backstage, Arm and Woman are having a go at Miss Elizabeth for going out last week on her own, who still seems to be torn in her allegiances. Hugh Morris beats Brad Armstrong with a ridiculously good-looking moonsault, not once but twice. Arn Anderson comes out to face Chris Jericho, Woman at his side but no Liz. She's watching from a monitor backstage as Arn takes control. Jericho counters with a second rope drop into a drop kick and fires back. A springboard lariat at the top rope spinning elbow. Anderson dodges a lion salt and nails a lovely DDT for the win. Jericho is definitely one to watch, just in case you didn't already know. Bischoff leaves the commentary desk, apparently on the hunt for the NWO. Backstage, Liz walks out with a suitcase in hand. Luger's out to face Wall Street, who now goes from the initials VK to M. Spot the link there, fact fans. Luger picks up the win and match that went longer than Anderson and Jericho. Go figure. Schiavone introduces a new Busch Grand National car painted with Sting's likeness as a peace offering. Yes, that actually happened. Megan Barbarian get a win over the Rock and Roll Express. Barbarian with a kick to Gibson. The Public Enemy come out to get the Dungeon of Doom, but Johnny Grunge gets his leg work for his troubles. We cut again to grainy footage of the NWO's hotel, now joined by the Nasties and Hogan's son Nick, who apparently likes fast cars. Main event time, Chris Benoit out with McMichaels to take on Rick Steiner. Rick has Benoit set for a top rope suplex, but McMichael hits Steiner with his briefcase to get the win for Benoit. Last, we get a final NWO vignette, Hogan and Giants to either side of Liz and make her promises of Hollywood. As she leaves, Savage arrives in the hallway of the hotel in full Macho Madness mode as we go off the air.
All right, thanks a lot, Tony. And I want to make one thing very clear. First of all, you pointed out that, they slapped me around. Yes, the New World Order, as Larry refers to it, did take over our broadcast booth. But listen, this isn't about Eric Bischoff. This is about the history of WCW and what that represents. This company's roots go back to 1905. Champions like Lou Thez, Terry and Dory Funk, Pat O'Connor, Dusty Rhodes. The names go on and on. It may not mean anything at all to Hulk Hogan, to the Outsiders, Hall and Nash, to Ted DiBiase, to that 180-pound wimp they call Six. Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all to them, but it does mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It has got to stop. It is going to stop, and it's going to stop now, because this company's not going to tolerate it. Not at the corporate level, not at the level here that all of us work at on Nitro to try to put together a program that people out there can enjoy. It's got to stop, because it's not fun anymore. Nobody's entertained by it. The NWO is nothing but dirtbags from the bottom all the way to the top. And yes, that means you, Hulk Hogan. And yes, Eric Bischoff has been accused of making a whole lot of mistakes, and I admit that I have. And my relationship with WCW may have only lasted the last 5 or 6 years, but let me tell you something. The one singular mistake I ever made was bringing Hulk Hogan into WCW. And Hogan and the rest of you thugs, because that's all you are, you're thugs. You want to come in here? You want to try to stop WCW? Well, we've worked too hard. We've worked too long. And gentlemen, and I use that word very carefully because it really doesn't apply. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Listen to me and listen to me now. It is going to stop. No more. Tony, Larry, take it back.
All right, Eric, I guess that
I'm
takes
moving
care of
on to
that.
the final part of the month. I think this is the Nitro that both Rory and Bryan seen very little of, so I'll patch in the stuff where we need to. But there's not a lot from the show that we need to discuss other than, well, I say discuss, you've seen it, but other than the Eric Bischoff promo that you, the listeners, will have just heard. I will fill in on that if the other two guys haven't seen it. I watched that and went brilliant. And I went brilliant because the one thing we haven't really seen is a concerted effort from WCW. And the one thing we really needed to see was someone just grab the ball by the horns and say, right, this is how it is, this cannot continue. I thought Bischoff was brilliant in his opening promo. And then, Rory, for the rest of the show, I was sat there going, where was the response? Because, yeah, we got on the show already, I don't want to cover all ground too much. But this entire show, we've basically been saying, where is the concerted effort from WCW? And you would have figured the week after they'd all come back from Japan, and all that stuff had gone down on Nitro, that there would have been some kind of response. NWO were in their hotel in the Marriott, and that played into the angle with Randy Savage at the end of the show. But it would have been nice to see some kind of WCW defense form. And instead, Rory, Cleveland got treated to just a load of really bad matches. Couldn't even see the NWO angles because there was no video wall. And my biggest concern, no response from the Team WCW or WCW roster. At some stage, for this angle to work, there needs to be a counterpunch. And right now, that just seems like an impossibility, or doesn't seem like anything's happening.
All things NWO all the time. That's pretty much where it is at the moment. And I want to believe that if WCW can hit back, that they should hit back. And if it's just going to be a case where you get a promo from Bischoff at the start, which is fine, but the rest of the whole show, which don't forget is still called WCW Monday Nitro, is just going to be a selection of work-a-day nothing matches and 5 or 6 really, really, really hard to watch in every sense of the phrase NWO skits in a hotel room, then that's not painting WCW in kayfabe terms in a very preferable light at all. It makes you wonder, are they really bothered? And I think, hang on guys, your organisation's being taken over here. You know, your livelihood's at stake. I want to care about this. I want to care about this battle. You need to care about this battle. And again, it needs to happen soon. It's not happening yet.
I guess you could probably argue that with Sting turning his back on WCW, maybe the morale of the troops are at an all-time low. And quite frankly, I mean, can you blame them? I mean, did you see what's on television? It is the NWO all the time, 24/7 at this point. I don't know where they're going to go from here. Like I just said earlier, it just looks like it's starting to decline. You can see the downfall of what's happening. And a year from now, will WCW even be around? I mean, it could just very well be the NWO show.
I wanted to see something. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all. I just wanted to see some kind of organisation, some kind of, you know, because the theme throughout the show, we don't often have morals on this show. And if there was a story to take away from this podcast, it would be every wrestling fan needs hope. Every WCW fan needs hope. And right now they don't have any. And I know to an extent that's a wrestling trope. The heels are very, very well organised. The baby faces aren't. That's the jeopardy. But right now I don't even know who the baby faces are. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the big story from this is going to be a big battle match between Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall against the team of a new Sting, not the fake one, not the real one in his current form, a new Sting and a slightly different guys, Randy Savage, and of all people, Ric Flair, because I think the big payoff for this should be, well, one, we're going to be trying to create a new style, but two, if we're not going to do that, let's have Flair and Savage unite against the common enemy. I think that's a really strong storyline. But, you know, and you can take your time to get there. I'm not saying we need to end the NWO now. There's some months to go in this angle yet. But you've got to give me something to grasp onto. I mean, don't get me wrong, it helps that Raw's terrible moment. If I'm watching wrestling on Monday night, I'm going to watch Nitro come on May. But give me something to hold on to. And I love Bishop's promo at the start. I thought that was really nice. But let's see it in action. Let's see a response. And I kind of thought that on a flat Nitro where NWO were away in the hotel thing and all that stuff, you could have had some promos from guys, the signers, you know, saying, we're not taking it anymore. That kind of thing. Do tell that kind of story where it's like, you know what, we're going to start to build, you know, we're going to start to build our own team WCW that's going to get back. Give me some hope. And they just haven't done it. That was my big complaint. Anyway, we started recording this show 3 hours and 12 minutes ago. Now, save some stuff that will get chopped in the edit. We're going to have to the entrance of this show is 4 minutes long, which is a rarity. This might well be the longest show we've ever done. Rory McNamara, who stepped in on about 28 hours notice, thank you very much.
My pleasure, my man. It's been great.
Yes, I'm pretty sure we just lost your mic, but you know we have to run these tech issues. Rory, tell people where they can find you on Twitter.
Yep, I'm on Twitter. You can get me there on Raw's DM. That is RORSDM.
With that one to trivialise Rory's appearance, Bryan Barrera, it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's always a blast.
You know, we have people with different viewpoints and different, you know, backgrounds on the show, etc., etc. But the one thing I always love about having Bryan on is just got a guy who's just nuts for WCW. And Bryan, if people don't know how much you are, tell them where they can find out just how into WCW you are.
You could go to WCWWorldwide.com. That's my main site, and that has so many WCW things. You can, there's everything there for the past month. It's just been me picking out random things about World Championship Wrestling that I like and want to write about, things that I don't think people really pay much attention to. So, like, one of the more recent thing is I try to have a complete look at the WCW Nitro Grill, a restaurant that existed for, I think, about a year and a half. So I went through and I scanned in the menu. I've got photos of all the different merchandise, some of the stuff that I own, some of the stuff that people online sent me, and even these great concept art of what the restaurant was supposed to look like versus what it ended up becoming. So just stuff like that. I try to do something beyond just wrestling and Nitro reviews. I want to just try to focus on some real unique things about World Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, I think you can leave it all there. Just, you know, you've got a free afternoon, just dive into that site. I mean, you know, Ryan, have you completed the WCW magazine collection now?
At this point, I have one from 97 I'm missing. 95's complete. Yeah, I think they have maybe like one or two from 97 I need to get, and then the entire run of the German WCW magazines. And other than that, I'm done.
Have you got any leads on the German magazine for us? I remember that was a target 6 months ago when we had you on last.
You were cutting out. Can you say that one more time?
Have you made any progress gathering together the German editions of the WCW magazine?
No, it is so weird. Like, I've seen one or two people mention they have those for sale, and I try to contact them, and I never get anything back. So it's kind of hard to find these things, and it's, I don't know. I'm asking for anyone out there, if you're listening and you got these things, you're willing to sell them to me, you know, hit me up on Twitter, WCW Worldwide.
There has never been more of a seller's market when it comes to WCW German editions of their magazine. Bryan is a willing buyer if you're out there. Anyway, I'm dizzy the amount of editing I'm going to have to do and how long the show's going to be. But if you've got this far, thank you very much. Anyway, to get some promotion in, I need to do. First of all, we have now joined Patreon. For those who don't know, you're going to get quite used to this plug over the coming months and shows. If you'd like to say thank you, if you got this far into the show, I think you're the kind of person that at least might be interested in this. But if you'd like to say thank you, chip in a couple of quid as a thank you for us, filling your commute, filling your evenings, enlightening you, moaning, etc., etc. Patreon.com/wrestling20YRS. You can donate any amount you like. What we've said, what I said, is that for $5 a month, which is about £4, I think, a month if you're in the UK, you can chip in, and we're not going to have any levels above that, but for $5 a month you can chip in, and in response we'll give you, in return, we will give you early access to shows, because we record minute shows throughout the month. They all go online at once, but some are ready a lot earlier than others. So if you want early access to shows, you'll get them when they're ready. You can do that at patreon.com/wrestling20YRS. There's a link in the description. As I said before, as in all the shows. We're not going to paywall any content. We might do the odd Q&A, and I have threatened Rory that we're going to go back and do Battle Bowl if we reach one goal. If you need an incentive to donate, surely having us going back and doing the works on a Battle Bowl review.
Don't listen to him.
Rory says, because Rory's going to have to be on that show. Like, Rory, you've not seen that show yet, have you?
I have somehow managed to restrain myself from watching Battle Bowl. How, I don't know. I know you're so effusive in your praise of it.
I mean, I'm quite worried now. It's been 3 years since I've seen it, and it's been a kind of running gag on a show that doesn't really happen. It was really terrible, but I'm just wondering whether, I mean, in a Stockholm Syndrome kind of way, we may come back and watch it. I'm like, well, it wasn't that bad. It really was. But anyway, if you want us to suffer, that's the incentive to donate. Link in the description, patreon.com/wrestling20YRS, all the info on there. Anyway, some other plugs. Certain volumes for you this month, volume 2, WWF League In Your House, Mind Games. We do discuss the fake Razor and fake Diesel angle that started on that side. There also now, 20 years ago, this is the whole famous thing where Eric Bischoff backstage earlier in his Thursday at the time. But WCW were shitting themselves that Kevin Nash and Scott Hall were going to return based on all the plugs. And so they ended up signing Nash and Hall to huge raises. So Vince McMahon even gave the two a parting gift long after they'd gone. That's volume 2. Volume 3 is ECW. We discussed that. That show is a weird show. Me, Kieran and Chris go in. I'll be polite and say we were undercooked preparation-wise going into that show. So that basically just resembles a big production meeting where we, in the middle, discuss some ECW stuff. But, that happened. And the line forward is me and Chris White taking our latest shit to the world of MMA and UFC. I've just seen the time. Let's wrap this up, shall we? I'm just at Bamber. You can find us on the website at Wrestling20, Twitter at Wrestling20YRS, on the web at Wrestling20YRS.com, Patreon.com/Wrestling20YRS, all the links from the website. I've been Bob Bamber. This has been Volume 1 of the September 1996 edition of Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. And until next time, goodbye.